Welcome to Noir Classics.
Chapter 1. The Widow with the Vanishing Mark. It was a little after 9, which in our house is not morning, so much as a time when Fritz is offended by human behavior. Fritz liked breakfast to be a ceremony, not a scramble, and Nero Wolf liked everything to be a ceremony except, oddly enough, murder. I had just finished telling Wolf that the coffee was decent, which is about as high praise as I ever give anything before noon, when the doorbell rang. Wolf did not move. Wolf almost never moved for a bell. That is what I am for, and I was for it. So I went down the hall and opened the door. A woman stood there with her hat in her hands, as if she had forgotten what hats were for. She was in her early 30s, and grief had done that efficient thing it does to some faces, sharpening the lines without deepening them. She wore plain wool, dark enough to be careful, and her eyes were clear enough to be dangerous. "Mr. Goodwin," she asked. "That is my name. If you have a better one, keep it. Come in." She stepped inside and paused as if the brownstone's air had rules she had not learned yet. She looked past me toward the office corridor, and I saw her take in the walls, the discreet lighting, the thick rugs, the calm. It does things to people. It tells them that if trouble comes in, it will have to take off its shoes. "I am Mara Klein," she said. "I wrote, but I was told I should come in person." "You were told right. Mr. Wolf prefers the truth to be presentable in the flesh. Follow me." In the office, Wolf was in his chair like a judge who had decided he was not impressed with the evidence. He glanced once at Mara Klein and went back to his thoughts, which were probably about orchids, lunch, or the general stupidity of mankind. I made introductions, indicated the red leather chair for clients, and sat at my desk to look industrious. Wolf waited. That is his best trick. People think silence is empty, and they rush to fill it with useful information. Mara Klein sat down, smoothed her skirt with a hand that wanted to tremble and refused, and spoke. "For 3 weeks," she said. "Every dawn there is a mark on my front door, a thin white line, like a slash of chalk. By noon it is gone." Wolf's eyes lifted, not much, just enough to show that his mind had taken a step toward her problem. "Gone," Wolf said. "You mean erased?" "Yes, cleaned, wiped away. I have tried to catch the person who does it, but I cannot stay awake all night, and I cannot be at the door all morning. I live alone. My husband died last year." "Condolences," I said. Because someone in the room had to be civil. She nodded once, curtly, not as gratitude, more as acknowledgement of a fact already filed. "My building is on Riddle Street," she went on. "It is not elegant, but it is safe enough. I have no enemies. I do not owe money. I do not have jewels. I do not have secrets worth blackmail. But that mark keeps coming, and it feels like a message, not to me, around me." Wolf made a small sound, a grunt polished to gentility. "You have observed this mark yourself," he said. "Yes, I have seen it at 6 in the morning, and again at 7. It is still there then. At noon, it is gone." "Are you certain it is on your door? Not beside it, not on the frame, not on the wall?" "It is on the door, at about chest height, slightly to the right of the knob." "You have attempted to remove it?" "Yes, with a damp cloth. It comes off easily. It is chalk." "Why have you not washed the door each morning before leaving?" "I did, the first week. But then I thought, if it is a signal, I should not interfere, and I did not want to make the person angry." That last sentence came out quieter, and it carried more truth than the rest. She was not worried about the mark. She was worried about what it belonged to. Wolf looked at me. That meant I had a job. "Mrs. Klein," I said, "have you talked to anyone in the building about it?" "I spoke to Mr. Brenner, the superintendent. He said people draw marks for deliveries, for repairs. For nonsense, he told me to stop worrying." I spoke to the woman across the hall, Mrs. Pell. She said I was being targeted and that I should move. "Did you call the police?" She gave me a glance that had a little contempt in it, but it was aimed at the system, not at me. "I did. They asked if anything was stolen. I said no. They asked if anyone threatened me. I said no. They advised me to call if something changed." Wolf's mouth tightened. A familiar abdication, he said. I brought something, Mara Klein said, and reached into her handbag. She produced a small square of cardboard, the kind you get from a dry cleaner when they want you to remember your number. On it was a thin white line, slightly curved, sharp at one end. I peeled it off the door, she said. It was fresh. I did it today. It is not all of it, but it is the middle. Wolf extended a hand, and I rose to deliver the cardboard to him, because Wolf has hands but prefers not to use them. He held it up, inspected it without haste, then handed it to me. I looked at it. It was chalk all right, but the line was too clean, too deliberate. Somebody had not scrawled it. They had drawn it with purpose. It is a slash, I said, a neat one. It is not a slash, Wolf said. It is a segment, part of a shape. A shape of what? Wolf's eyes narrowed, which on him is like a telescope focusing. That, he said, is why you are paid, Archie. Mara Klein's mouth tightened. I have not yet paid anyone, she said. I do not even know what you charge. Wolf's gaze rested on her, steady, like a cat deciding whether a mouse is sincere. Madam, he said, if you are here, you are already spending. The question is whether you will spend intelligently. Mr. Goodwin will visit your building. If he concludes your anxiety is theatrical, you will pay only for the intrusion. If he concludes there is danger, you will pay for competence. That is not an answer, she said, but she was listening. Wolf named a retainer that was not cruel, but not charitable either. She hesitated for one beat, then nodded. All right, I will pay. I want the mark to stop, and I want to know why it started. Very well, Wolf said. Mr. Goodwin will accompany you now. Now was not Wolf's favorite word at that hour. It meant he was genuinely interested, or he suspected that if we waited, something would happen without us, and Wolf hated being left out of anything that might later embarrass him. I got my coat, my hat, and my most agreeable face, the one I keep for widows and bank managers. On the sidewalk outside, the city had that damp look it gets when the night has washed it but not forgiven it. The rain was gone, but the stone and brick still shone as if New York liked showing off its stains. We took a cab. Mara Klein sat rigid, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the passing streets. I watched her profile and thought, she is not melodramatic. If she is frightened, it has weight. Riddle Street was in the Lower West Side. One of those strips that had survived fashion by never attempting it. The building was 5 stories. Brown brick, iron railings. The foyer smelled of boiled cabbage and old varnish. The mailboxes were dented. The hallway light was dim, and the stairs made noises as if they had stories. Her door was on the 3rd floor, number 3. B, the door itself was painted a dull green, chipped near the bottom. I could see where the cardboard square had been peeled away. A faint sticky patch, but no chalk line. It was past noon. Where exactly? I asked. She showed me, chest height, right of the knob, just as she had said. Do you have a photo? I asked. Because I learned long ago that people's memories are loyal but not reliable. She took a folded sheet from her bag and handed it over. It was a small printed picture, the kind you get from a drugstore kiosk. The photo showed her door with a white chalk line, thin and clean, slightly curved. All right, I said. Let us meet the superintendent. We found Mr. Brenner in the basement, where a man can pretend he runs a building because he knows where the pipes are. He was a thick man with heavy forearms and a face that had been taught to sneer for free. His shirt was stained with something that might have been coffee or might have been history. Yeah, he said when Mara introduced me. This about the chalk again. It is about your job, I said, which includes noticing things. Tell me who comes and goes early mornings, he snorted. I do not sit on the stairs at dawn. But you clean, I said. Or you hire someone to clean. Is the hall washed before noon? He frowned. The hall lady, that is the tenants. I sweep sometimes. A kid comes twice a week for the stairs. The doors are tenants' business. So no one wipes chalk marks off doors as part of routine maintenance. He shrugged. Not me. I watched him while he shrugged. He did it too easily. He did not like questions, but he liked being the man who could shrug them away. "Anyone complained besides Mrs. Klein?" I asked. "Number any trouble in the building lately?" I asked. "Thefts? Strangers? Arguments? Cops?" He scratched his chin. "Kids in 5D had a party." Neighbors yelled. "That is all, look, lady. People draw chalk, delivery guys, kids. Maybe she does it in her sleep." Mara Klein's eyes flashed, sharp enough to cut. "I do not," she said. I stepped in, because widows have enough trouble without being accused of sleep chalking. "Mr. Brenner," I said, "if you see that mark tomorrow morning, call Mrs. Klein, and then call me. If you do not, I will assume you are either blind or complicit." "Complicit," he echoed, offended. "In chalk. Chalk is a wonderful medium," I told him. "It comes off easy, so do lies if you wash them soon enough." We left him in the basement, where he belonged. Back upstairs, Mara led me to her apartment. It was small, neat, and carefully empty, as if she had learned that clutter can be used against you. There were books, but no photographs on display. There was a faint smell of lavender and something else, something metallic that could have been nothing but made my mind note it anyway. "You said the mark feels like a message," I said, standing in her living room. "Do you have any reason to think you are being watched?" She looked down at her hands. "I feel eyes sometimes when I leave in the morning. That might be imagination. It might be grief." "What do you do for work?" "I keep accounts for a small shipping firm." "Enemies?" I said. "Old boyfriends, relatives, people your husband owed money to." "My husband was a careful man," she said. "He was quiet. He sold antiques. He died in his sleep." I nodded. Quiet men get murdered too, but I did not say it. "Who had keys to your apartment?" I asked. "Besides you. Mr. Brenner has a master key. The cleaning woman has a key, but she comes only on Wednesdays." "What time does she arrive?" "Usually around 10. "Who is she?" "A woman named Dora Minks." I made a note. "Mrs. Klein," I said, "I am going to be in this building tomorrow morning before dawn. I would like you to behave normally. Do not peek out. Do not lurk. Do not make any special effort. If someone is drawing that mark, I want them comfortable." She swallowed. "And if someone erases it at noon, I will be here for that too," I said. "I am a cheerful man, but I can endure mornings for a fee." She almost smiled. Almost. When I left her apartment, I did not go straight downstairs. I took a slow lap around the third-floor corridor, looked at the doors, and checked the sightlines. Mrs. Pell's door across from Mara's was painted brown and had a cheap wreath, a touch of domestic optimism. At the far end of the corridor, there was a window overlooking the alley. Anyone watching that hall would need to be inside it, or have a peephole and the patience of a cat. I knocked on Mrs. Pell's door. It opened a crack. An eye appeared, suspicious, pale. "Mrs. Pell," I said, "my name is Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe." The door opened wider, not because of the name, but because of curiosity, which is a more reliable force. Mrs. Pell was in her late 50s, hair in rollers, house dress that had seen better years and ignored them. Her apartment smelled of frying onions. "You hear about the widow?" she asked. "I am here about the chalk," I said. "Have you ever seen who makes the mark?" "No," she said promptly, which meant either she had not or she was lying with talent. But I told her, that is a sign. That is how they pick places. "They," I said. "Thieves," she said. "Or worse, people who do not want to be seen." "Have you ever seen the mark yourself?" I asked. "On her door?" "Yes," she said. "Once early, white as bone. Was it the same shape as in this picture?" I showed her the photo. She nodded. "That is it." "Any other marks?" I asked. "On other doors, on the wall, on the stairs, anywhere." She hesitated. That hesitation was the first useful thing she had given me. "On the stairs," she said. "Sometimes. Little white smudges, but I thought that was kids." "Which stairs?" I asked. "Down by the basement near the back exit." I thanked her, not too warmly, and took my leave. As I went down, I looked at the stair treads. On the third floor, nothing. On the second, nothing. On the first, faint white dust in the corner by the railing, as if someone had tapped a stick of chalk there and then wiped their fingers. In the foyer, I paused near the mailboxes. There was a small white scuff on the brick beside them. It could have been old paint. It could have been chalk. It could have been nothing. But when you are looking for whispers, you do not ignore the quiet. Outside, I walked down the block and studied the building's front. No cameras. No doorman. People going in and out were on their own. I went to the nearest corner store, bought a pack of cigarettes. I had no intention of smoking, and asked the clerk, a thin boy with a bored face, if he ever saw anyone hanging around the entrance early mornings. He shrugged. "Old guys, dog walkers, garbage trucks, anion with chalk," I said. He stared at me. "Chalk for what? School?" "Sure," I said. "School of hard knocks." He shrugged again. That was the neighborhood's official answer to curiosity. I took a cab back to West 35th. By the time I got home, Wolf was in the dining room, and the smell from the kitchen said Fritz had decided we had earned lunch, even if the world had not. After lunch, with Wolf in the office and me at my desk, I reported what I had. Wolf listened with his eyes half closed, as if my words were a stream he could sip at leisure. "A chalk mark on a door," Wolf said when I finished, "can be childish, trivial, or criminal. The manner of its appearance and disappearance suggests intention. The certainty of its timing suggests routine. The curve suggests it is not merely a line." "So you like it," I said. "I dislike it," Wolf corrected. "I dislike any phenomenon that demands my attention at dawn." "I will be the phenomenon," I said. "I will get there before dawn, watch who draws it, and see who removes it at noon." Wolf's lips tightened. "You will also obtain a sample of the chalk." "I have one," I said, holding up the cardboard square. "That is inadequate. It is contaminated with adhesive. You will obtain chalk itself, if possible." "Sure," I said. "I will ask the culprit to lend me his stick." Wolf ignored the remark, which is his second best trick. "Also," he said, "you will ascertain whether the mark is indeed unique. If it appears on other doors, or in other places, the significance changes." "That will mean talking to more neighbors," I said. "Yes, use your charm. It is your most useful vice." I rose. "All right. Tomorrow morning I will be on Riddle Street before the sun has finished deciding whether to show up." Wolf's eyes were on the cardboard. "Archie, yeah, do not allow your imagination to substitute for observation." "That is fair," I said. "But if I catch the man with chalk in his hand, can I imagine him into handcuffs?" Wolf's mouth twitched, almost a smile, but he did not grant it full citizenship. "I prefer," he said, "reason alone as always." I left him to his chair and his certainties. Upstairs, the orchids would soon demand his attention and get it, and Fritz would plan dinner with the solemnity of a man arranging a treaty. Down on Riddle Street, a thin white mark would appear at dawn and vanish by noon, clean as a whisper, bold as a warning. And I had the uncomfortable feeling that the mark was not meant to frighten Mara Klein at all. It was meant to tell someone else that the door was ready. Chapter 2. A watch with no footsteps if you want to know what a man is made of. Do not ask his mother. Put him in a dim hallway at 2 in the morning, with a folding chair that has one leg shorter than the other, and give him nothing to do but listen to a building breathe. A man will either turn into a philosopher or a lunatic. I split the difference and became a tired professional with a sore back. I got to Riddle Street at 11:15 with a thermos of coffee, a paperback I did not intend to read, and the kind of patience you borrow against tomorrow and pay back with interest. Mara Klein opened her door at my knock and looked at me with the steady face she wore when she was trying not to show gratitude, fear, or anything else that might make her feel dependent. "You are certain you want to do this?" she asked. "I am certain I want to get paid," I said. "The rest is negotiable." She let me in just long enough for me to place my chair outside her door and check the corridor. The hall was quiet, but it was not peaceful. There is a difference. Peace is a choice. Quiet is what you get when people are asleep and trouble is practicing. Across from her, Mrs. Pell's door was shut, but I could feel her behind it. Some people could detect a raised eyebrow through a brick wall. I placed my chair with my back against the wall to the left of Mara's door, where I could see the length of the corridor and also keep her door in my peripheral vision. I did not want to stare at it all night, like a man waiting for a confession from a doorknob. I wanted to watch the space around it, the way a card player watches hands and shoulders, not faces. Mara hovered inside her doorway for a second. "If something happens," she said, "should I call the police?" "If something happens," I told her, "we will decide whether the police deserve the honor. Go to bed. Lock your door. Do not listen for noises. I will do that for both of us." She nodded once and shut the door. The lock clicked, and the corridor and I were formally introduced. The first hour was nothing but ordinary building sounds, which in a place like that means a steady parade of small miseries. Pipes ticked. Somewhere an elevator made a coughing complaint. A radiator sighed as if it had been asked to support the weight of human disappointment and had accepted. The building settled in its bones, wood complaining against plaster, old nails shifting their loyalties. Around midnight, the door on the second floor opened, and a man came up the stairs with the cautious footfall of someone who did not want neighbors to know he had been out. He carried a paper bag that smelled of fried food, and he glanced at me once, then decided I was not his business. "You lost?" he asked. "Anyway, because curiosity will always purchase a cheap ticket." "No," I said. "I am found." He frowned, did not like that answer, and went into his apartment at 1:30. Laughter drifted down from above, then died off, replaced by a muffled argument, then silence, then the soft thump of something thrown. That was the party crowd in 5D. The one Brenner had mentioned. They were young enough to believe noise is a right. At 2, a door opened softly on my floor. Mrs. Pell's door, across from Mara's. A thin strip of light cut into the hallway. An eye appeared, then a nose, then Mrs. Pell herself in a robe that had once been pink and had since been educated. She looked at me like I was a stain that had taken a chair. "You are really sitting there," she whispered. "That is the idea," I whispered back. "If you have a better one, bring it in a basket." "What if he comes?" she asked. "Who?" She bristled. "The one doing it." "If he comes," I said. "I will notice, that is why I am here." She hesitated, wanting to say something else, then thought better of it and shut her door. The strip of light vanished. By 3, my eyes had adjusted so well that the hallway's dimness had turned into a kind of grey clarity. Shadows became familiar, corners got names, and the pattern of the carpet looked like a map of minor sins. I drank coffee in small sips, because too much at once would make my heart do the Charleston. At 3:40, the elevator coughed again, louder this time. It stopped on the 4th floor, then creaked down to the lobby, and I heard the outer door open and close. Someone leaving late or coming home early. No footsteps passed my post. Whoever it was, they did not come to the 3rd floor. At 4:30, I heard the soft creak of the stairs behind me. I turned my head and saw nothing. The creak came again, then stopped. It was the sound of a building remembering old traffic, not a person making new. At 5:30, the light outside the corridor window began to change, not bright yet, but thinning the darkness the way a careful man thins a lie. Dawn was on its way, and I had seen exactly what I had come to see, which was nothing. No footsteps approached Mara Klein's door, no shadow paused near it. No hand lifted chalk, no arm reached out from a doorway, and no cat performed a late-night art project. At 6:05, the corridor was still. I stood, stretched my legs, and walked 3 paces to Mara's door. The mark was there, fresh, white, clean, and perfectly placed at chest height, to the right of the knob. A thin curve, like a segment of a larger shape. It looked smug. It looked like it had been waiting for me to notice. For a second I just stared, because my brain was trying to argue with my eyes, and my eyes were not in a cooperative mood. Then I leaned closer. The chalk line was not only sharp, it was unsmudged, as if it had been drawn with a firm pressure and then left alone. That was hard to manage in a hallway with damp air and old paint. I ran a finger just beside the line, not on it, and felt nothing but the door's rough surface. I looked at the floor, no chalk dust. I looked at the baseboard, nothing. I looked at the ceiling, nothing. Then I looked at the peephole. A thin ring of white dust clung around the peephole's outer rim, the kind you would not notice unless you were already angry and alert. It was faint, but it was there. I leaned closer and saw a tiny scratch on the paint near the peephole, the kind made by something pressed against the door and shifted a hair. I stepped back, sat down, and let my thoughts catch up with my pulse. If the mark appeared without anyone approaching the door, then either I was a poor watchman, or someone had found a way to make the door draw on itself. That ring of chalk dust around the peephole was a whisper with good manners. I knocked on Mara's door. There was a pause, then the chain slid, and her face appeared in the gap. Her eyes went straight to the mark. She went pale, not dramatically, but with the quick drain of a woman who has been right about her fear. "You saw it happen," she whispered. "I saw it be there," I said. "That is worse. Let me in." She unchained the door and stepped back. Inside, her apartment looked the same as the day before, neat and careful, but now it had a new tension in it, as if the air had been told a secret. I closed the door and turned immediately to the inside surface. The peephole, from the inside, had a cheap brass collar. Around that collar, the paint had a slightly different sheen, as if something had been pressed there and removed. Not much, just enough for a man who had spent the night being lied to by a hallway. "Have you cleaned this area recently?" I asked. "No," she said. "Why?" I took out my pocket knife and gently lifted at the edge of that different sheen. A thin bit of clear tape came up, almost invisible. It had been cut to fit around the peephole collar, pressed flat and neat. I held it up. Mara's mouth opened, then shut. That was not there. "It was there," I said. "You just did not know it." "Who would put tape on my door?" "Someone who wanted to attach something without leaving a permanent mark," I said. "Someone who did not want to stand in the hallway and draw." I crouched, examined the inside surface near the peephole, and found another clue, small and irritating, a faint arc of scuffed paint, as if a tiny device had been held there, then rotated away. A device. A simple clamp, perhaps, fitted over the peephole from the inside, with a thin arm that could extend out through the peephole. Opening, a chalk tip could be held at the end, a spring could be loaded. A time, release could be as crude as a bit of wax that softened when the apartment warmed, or a thread that loosened when morning drafts shifted. A child could make it if the child was clever, and the stakes were mean. If such a device had been attached during the day, it could sit there politely all night, and then, at some chosen moment, press chalk to the outer door and draw a curved segment. No footsteps, no hallway visitor. The door itself would do the deed, with only a soft pressure and no sound louder than a guilty thought. Mara watched me, her hands clenched. "You mean someone was in my apartment," she said. "That is the logical inconvenience," I told her, "unless you sleepwalk and build mechanisms." "I do not." "I believe you," I said, "which is unfortunate because it means we have company." She swallowed. "The master key." "Yes," I said. "The master key and anyone else who has had access, cleaning woman, superintendent, a locksmith, a former tenant who made a copy. Your late husband, if he kept spares, a friend you trusted. Trust is the easiest lock to pick." She stared at the inside of her door as if it might confess. "I have not given a key to anyone," she said. That does not mean no one has one, I said. Do you have a spare hidden outside? Number in a flower pot under a mat taped to the frame. Number all right, I said. Then we start with Brenna and the cleaning woman and work outward. She looked at the mark on the outside of her door, visible through the crack where the chain had been. Why would someone do this? She asked. Why not just rob me, if that is what they want? Because it may not be about you, I said. Or because the mark is not for robbing. It may be for warning, for identifying, for timing, for something that needs coordination. Her eyes lifted to mine. For someone hungry. That was her phrase from yesterday, and now it sounded less poetic and more like a report. I told her to stay inside, to call me if anyone came by with an excuse, and I went out into the hall again. The mark sat there with its quiet arrogance. I did not touch it. I did not want to ruin it before Wolf saw my notes and drew his own line through the nonsense. At 8:30. The building woke up. Doors opened. Shoes shuffled. Voices rose and fell. A man carried a briefcase down the stairs. A woman hauled a laundry bag. A child whined with the authority of youth. Everyone had somewhere to go, and none of them looked at the mark. At 10, the cleaning woman arrived. I knew it was her before Mara told me the name, because she moved the way women move when they are used to being unseen. Dora Minks was short, strong, and wrapped in a coat that had once been practical. She carried a canvas bag of supplies and kept her eyes down, not timid, just efficient. She stopped at Mara's door and fumbled for a key. That was enough. I stepped forward. Miss Minks. She jerked her head up, startled. Her eyes were sharp and suspicious. Yes, she said. Her voice had the dry tone of a woman who has been asked too many questions by people who do not pay her. My name is Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolf. I would like to ask you a few questions before you go in there. She glanced at Mara's door, then at the mark, then back at me. Her gaze lingered on the chalk line a fraction too long. What is that? She asked. You tell me, I said. I do not know, she snapped. Kids, you come on Wednesdays, I said. Today is Wednesday. You have a key. Who gave it to you? Mrs. Klein, she said automatically, then caught herself. Her husband gave it to me before. Mara's husband, the quiet antique man, the dead man in his sleep. How long ago? I asked. 2 years, she said. I clean for the building. 3 apartments, sometimes more. Do you ever come earlier than 10? Number. Do you ever let anyone into apartments besides the tenant? Her mouth tightened. I do not steal. I did not say you did, I said. I asked if you let anyone in. She hesitated. That was her first confession, and it was not even a verbal one. The superintendent, she said. Sometimes if there is a leak. If there is a repair. Brenna, I said. How often has he asked you to open Mrs. Klein's place? She frowned, thinking. Once or twice. After her husband died, he said he had to check the pipes. Did he? I asked. I do not know, she said. He went in. I waited in hall. I nodded slowly. Brenna had a master key, but it did not mean he would use it openly. A man with a master key still enjoys having someone else hold the blame. Miss Minks, I said, when you clean, do you wipe chalk marks off doors? Her eyes widened a little. Number. Do you wipe anything off doors? I pressed. Smudges, dirt, marks. She shrugged. If it is dirty, yes. Doors get hands. You have not seen that white mark before, I said. No, she said, too quickly. I let that hang between us. People who tell the truth do not rush to be done with it. Listen, I said, softer. Someone is entering this apartment without permission. Someone may be using you, or using the superintendent, or using something else. I do not care about pride. I care about facts. If you have seen that mark before, say so. Her lips worked, then she spoke, reluctant. I saw it once. Last week, I thought it was nothing. I wiped it. At noon, I asked. She blinked. It was late morning. I do not know time. I clean. I wipe. That is my job. So the disappearance by noon was not necessarily a separate actor with a separate schedule. It could be Dora, doing what she does, erasing the signal because it was dirt in her world. And then someone decided it was safer to arrange for it to vanish before she arrived. Or they adjusted, knowing she would arrive and remove it without questions. Wolf would like that. It was a chain of habits, not a chain of miracles. I told Dora Minx to wait, knocked on Mara's door, and asked Mara to step out, chain on, just enough to confirm that she had not authorized any early entry. She confirmed it with a quiet certainty that made my teeth ache. I sent Dora on her way, under protest, and told her I would speak to her again. Then I went downstairs to find Brenner. He was in the basement again, because of course he was. He looked up when he saw me and scowled like a man who has been promised consequences. "You again," he said. "Yes," I said. "Good news. The chalk mark is not a prank. Bad news. It appears without anyone in the hallway." He snorted. "Magic." "No," I said. "Mechanics. Someone attached something on the inside of Mrs. Klein's door. Tape residue around the peephole. Chalk dust around the outside rim. That means someone has been in her apartment." His face changed, not much, but enough. He was startled, which suggested he had not expected me to find a method so quickly. A man who is innocent is often offended first. Brenner was cautious first. "That is crazy," he said. "It is inconvenient," I corrected. "Who besides you has access to that apartment?" He spread his hands. "No one. I got the key. That is it." "The cleaning woman has a key," I said. He waved it away. "She got it from the husband. That is her business." "And you asked her to open the apartment for you," I said. "Once or twice." His eyes narrowed. "She told you that?" "She did," I said. "Now tell me why you needed help opening a door you claim you can open yourself." His jaw worked. "I do not like going in alone, people accuse." "People accuse when they have reasons," I said. "What were you checking for? Pipes or jewelry?" He flushed. "Watch your mouth." "I am watching everything," I said. "Including you. Tomorrow morning, I will be here again. If you go near that door before noon, I will know. If anyone goes near it, I will know. If it happens anyway, I will know something else." He glared at me, then turned away, pretending to check a toolbox that did not need checking. It left him, because a man like that will talk only when he believes the alternative is worse. Back at the office on West 35th, Wolf was in the orchid room when I arrived, which meant he had spent the day doing what he considers honest work. The orchid room always smells like money that refuses to be vulgar. Wolf came down to the office at my report time, settled in his chair, and looked at me with the composed impatience of a man who prefers facts delivered neatly. I gave him everything, including the tape residue, the chalk dust, Dora Minx's admission, and Brenner's reaction. Wolf's eyes stayed on my face, not my hands, because Wolf listens with his head, not his ears. When I finished, he nodded once. "You sat in the hall all night," he said. "Yes. And yet the mark appeared." "Yes. Therefore," Wolf said, "either you failed, or the mark was made without a visit to the hall." "I vote for the second," I said. "My pride is delicate." Wolf ignored that. "The mail slot," Wolf said softly. "Yes," I said, "it is the angle and the slot." "Yes," I said, "it is the angle and the slot." Wolf's lips tightened with something like satisfaction, which for him is a rare form of generosity. "Not an alibi," he said. "An angle, the door is not merely a surface, it is an instrument. Someone has constructed a means for the mark to be applied from within." "Meaning someone entered her apartment earlier and installed a gadget," I said. "Or had a gadget installed. Tape around the peephole suggests attachment without damage." Wolf's fingers steepled. "And the erasure, likely the cleaning woman, at least once," I said. "The routine might be shifting. The disappearance by noon could be because someone wants it gone before Dora arrives and asks questions. or because Dora already made it disappear without knowing she was participating. Wolf made a small sound, approving and annoyed at the same time. Human habit, he said. It is the greatest accomplice. Archie, tomorrow you will not sit in the hall. Music to my spine, I said. You will be inside, Wolf said. With Mrs. Klein's permission, you will observe her door from within, specifically the mail slot apparatus. You will also search her apartment for any trace of an installed mechanism, however temporary. Tape residue is not sufficient. I want evidence. All right, I said. What about Brenner? Wolf's eyes narrowed. He is an obvious possibility, therefore. He may be innocent, but his access is a fact. The cleaning woman's access is also a fact, and the deceased husband's key distribution is a fact we do not yet understand. You think the husband matters? I said. I think, Wolf said, that a mark appearing at dawn and vanishing by noon is not merely a threat. It is communication. We must determine to whom and why the widow is the chosen bulletin board. He leaned back slightly, and the chair accepted him like an old friend. Angles, Wolf said again, almost to himself, not alibis. Outside, New York kept moving with its usual determination to pretend it is not scared of anything. Inside our brownstone, Wolf had found a new irritation to enjoy, and I had found a door that could draw without being touched, which meant the man with the chalk was either clever or confident or both. And that is when things start to get expensive. Chapter 3. A dead man with a borrowed past. If you have never spent a morning crouched by a peephole with your dignity in your pocket, you have missed one of life's smaller humiliations. I was inside Mara Klein's apartment before daylight, perched on a straight back chair facing the inside of her front door, as if I expected it to sing. Mara had made coffee. It was not Fritz's coffee, but it was honest, and honest coffee is better than none when dawn is still undecided. You are certain you want me here? She asked for the second time. I am certain Wolf wants facts, I said. When Wolf wants facts, I deliver them, or I develop a limp. She tried to smile, failed neatly, and sat on her sofa with her hands folded. She did not look toward the door much. People who are frightened either stare at the threat or refuse to acknowledge it. She chose refusal, which is respectable but inefficient. The inside of the door told me more than the hallway had. In daylight, the rubbed sheen around the mail slot lip was clearer. Someone had worked there repeatedly, careful not to leave a mark obvious enough for a tenant to notice. At 5:48, while the building still sounded half asleep, I put my ear near the door. No voices, no footsteps in the hall, nothing but the pipes doing their old man clicking, and the faint, distant elevator complaint. At 6:02, I heard it. Not a footstep, not a door. A small, brief sound, the kind that would mean nothing if you were not already listening for the world to betray itself. A soft tap, as if something inside the door had snapped from one position to another. I leaned closer to the peephole. The brass collar shifted a hair, then settled. I did not breathe for 3 seconds. Then I took a breath like a man who wants his lungs in court as witnesses. That, I said quietly, was something. Mara's head lifted. What was it? A mechanism saying good morning, I told her. Stay where you are. I took my pocket knife and, with patience, eased the inner collar of the peephole loose. It was cheap hardware, the kind installed by landlords who consider security an optional mood. The collar came away, and with it came a thin ring of waxed thread, pale and tight, as if it had been looped around the collar for a purpose. Waxed thread is a polite way to say somebody planned for moisture and time. Behind the collar, tucked into the small cavity around the peephole tube, was a sliver of metal, no longer than my thumb, shaped like a tiny spring arm. At the end of it was chalk dust, ground into the metal as if the tip had been dipped and tapped. The arm was attached to a thin, flat piece of plastic that had been pressed against the inside of the door with tape. The whole thing was clever in a mean way. A spring arm loaded and held by waxed thread. As the apartment warmed in the early morning, the wax softened, the thread relaxed. The arm snapped forward, pushing a chalk tip through the peephole opening and against the outside surface of the door. Not enough to draw a full circle, not enough to make noise, just enough to make a neat curved segment if the chalk tip was guided by the edge of the peephole ring. No footsteps, no hallway visitor. The door drew its own mark like a trained pet. I held up the little arm for Mara to see. She stared at it as if it were an insect that had crawled out of her life. "Samainen put that inside my door," she said, her voice thin. "Yes," I said, "and they did it without disturbing you, which means they had time, access, and confidence." "Brenner," she whispered. "Maybe," I said, "or someone using Brenner, or someone who used his master key once and never again needed him." I gathered the pieces carefully into an envelope. Wolf had asked for evidence, and Wolf likes evidence the way Fritz likes clean knives. "At least now we know how," Mara said. "Knowing how is the part that makes you want to know why," I told her. "I'm going downstairs." I found Brenner in the lobby pretending to adjust a mailbox door that did not need adjusting. He straightened when he saw me, and his face went into its practiced shape. "You got nothing," he said. "I have a spring arm, waxed thread, and chalk dust," I replied, "which is more than nothing and less than justice." His eyes flicked to the envelope in my hand, then away. That flick was too quick and too controlled. A man who is innocent often stares at an accusation as if it is an insult. Brenner glanced at it as if it were a bill. "That proves nothing," he said. "It proves someone was inside Mara Klein's apartment and installed a device," I said. "Now we discuss keys. Who else had access to her apartment besides you and Dora Minks?" "No one," he said. "You keep saying that," I told him. "It makes me think your vocabulary needs more words." He spit out a breath. "Tenants make copies. They give keys to girlfriends. They lose keys. You want a list of human stupidity, go outside." "I want your list," I said. "Who lived in 3B before Mara and her husband?" He hesitated half a beat. That was long enough. "Name," I said. "Frank Lofaro," he said finally. "He moved out 3 years ago. Where did he go?" "I do not know. He left, people leave." "Did he leave quietly?" I asked. "Or did he leave owing money?" Brenner's mouth tightened. "Rent was paid." "Did he have trouble with anyone?" I asked. "Any fights? Any police? Any complaints?" Brenner shrugged, but this time it was not lazy. It was defensive. "I got work," he said, and turned away. He was lying, but he was not lying well enough to relax me. He was lying like a man who knows the wrong truth can hurt him. I went upstairs and told Mara to keep her door chained, to tell Dora Minks she was not cleaning today, and to call me if anyone asked questions about her routine. Then I took the envelope back to West 35th, where Nero Wolf sat in his office like a man who believed chairs were the proper place to solve crimes. He examined the mechanism without touching it, which for Wolf is almost intimacy. "Competent," he said at last. "Thank you," I said. "I made it myself out of spite." Wolf ignored that. He asked a few questions that made my back itch because they were the right questions. "Waxed thread," Wolf murmured. "Heat, timing, reliable release. Whoever did this has done it before, or at least has the mind of someone who prefers systems to improvisation." "Predator," I said. Wolf's eyes lifted to mine. "Yes, but we must not be melodramatic. Predators also shop for groceries." I was about to answer when the doorbell rang again. Fritz was in the kitchen. Wolf was in his chair. I was, as usual, Destiny's errand boy. At the door was Inspector Brenner. The other Brenner, New York's version of Inevitable Rain. He was broad, tired, and annoyed that the world kept presenting him with work. With him was Sergeant Pearlie Stebbins, who wore his earnestness like a badge. "Morning," I said. "You boys look cheerful." Inspector Brenner pushed past me without ceremony. "Wolf, intrude," Wolf said, as if granting permission to a bad smell. Brenner held up a folded paper. "You know a woman named Mara Klein?" Wolf did not blink. "Yes." Brenner's gaze shifted to me. "You were at her building last night." "I was," I said. "Is that an accusation or a compliment?" It is a fact, Brenner snapped. A man is dead in a hotel room. Frank Lafaro. Ring any bells. It rang plenty. It rang the way a coin rings on a hard floor. Wolf's eyes narrowed slightly. The former tenant of Mrs. Klein's apartment. Brenner stared at him. How do you know that? Wolf's voice stayed even. Because Mr. Goodwin asked the superintendent who lived there previously. Stebbins spoke, eager. The desk clerk says this Lafaro checked into the hotel yesterday afternoon. Paid cash, asked odd questions before he took the room. Odd in what way? Wolf asked. Stebbins opened his notebook. He asked who lived where, who lived alone, who kept regular hours. He asked if the hotel had tenants or just guests. He asked if anyone watched the hallways. I felt my stomach tighten because those were not questions a man asks for sport. Those were questions a man asks when he is learning how to move through other people's lives without being seen. Inspector Brenner's eyes were hard. No struggle, no note, no obvious cause, yet medical examiner is working. But I do not like coincidences, Wolf. You have one of them, and I have a dead man. Wolf leaned back an inch, which is as close as he comes to leaning forward. Where? Wolf asked. Is this hotel? Brenner named it. Across town, mid-level, respectable enough to have clean sheets, shady enough to accept cash without questions. And Mr. Lafaro's interest in routines and solitary residence, Wolf said softly, connects him to Mrs. Klein's building. Or he was a creep with broad interests, Brenner said. But I came here because your assistant was at that building all night, and now the former tenant is dead. You think Archie killed him, I said. That hurts my feelings. I barely had time to kill my patients. Brenner ignored me. He always ignores what he cannot file. Wolf's eyes were on the folded paper in Brenner's hand. The name, Wolf said. Give it to me. Brenner handed it over. Wolf read it, and I watched Wolf's face do something rare. Not surprise, not fear recognition. Wolf looked up. Inspector, he said. This is no longer a nuisance involving chalk. It is a matter of selection and cataloguing. Mr. Lafaro asked questions as if he were building a roster of targets. That implies he was either the architect of the system or a participant in it. Brenner frowned. System. Wolf gestured slightly toward my desk. Archie has obtained evidence of a mechanism installed within Mrs. Klein's door. It permits a chalk mark to appear at dawn without a person approaching from the hallway. This suggests planning and practice. Stebbins' eyes widened. A machine drew the mark. A simple device, Wolf said. Almost disdainful, but a device nonetheless. Inspector Brenner stared at me. You have that device. Envelope, I said, and tapped it. Souvenir. Brenner exhaled, annoyed, then looked back at Wolf. All right, so someone marks doors without being seen. A former tenant asks about who lives alone and who keeps regular hours. Then he ends up dead. What do you make of it? Wolf's voice was calm, but there was steel under it. I make of it, Wolf said, that Mrs. Klein is not the principal target. She is a location. She is a reference point. The mark is not a threat to her. It is a signal to someone else. A signal for what? Brenner demanded. Wolf's eyes narrowed further. For access, for timing, for confirmation. It could indicate an apartment is empty at certain hours. It could indicate a resident is predictable. It could indicate a key is obtainable. The curve suggests a larger design. A segment implies other segments. A roster, as Mr. Goodwin has put it. Stebbins flipped pages. The desk clerk also said, Lafaro asked about rooms with doors that faced a hallway camera. He avoided them. Inspector Brenner grunted. He was careful. Careful men, Wolf said, often acquire enemies. Brenner's mouth twisted. Or they step into other people's business. Wolf, I want you to stay out of this. Wolf's eyes hardened. Number, that was all. Wolf can say no, in a way that makes grown men feel like they have been denied oxygen. Inspector Brenner glared. A man is dead. And a woman is being used as a bulletin board by unseen hands, Wolf replied. I will not indulge your departmental pride. If you wish my cooperation, you will provide me information. If you do not, you will flounder. That is your choice. For a moment, Brenner looked like he might explode. then remembered that exploding in Wolf's office only gives Wolf a reason to be smug. "Fine," Brenner said. "Stebbins, give them the basics." Stebbins read from his notes, and I listened like a man reading a menu he does not like, but has to order from anyway. Frank Lofaro, late 40s, former tenant, checked into the hotel under his own name. He carried no luggage except a small bag. He asked questions about residents and routines, not just in our building's neighborhood, but as a general habit. He requested a room that faced the rear. He declined maid service at 9:40 this morning. He was found dead on the bed, fully clothed, eyes open, expression mild. No signs of struggle, no visible wounds. His wallet was on the dresser, cash untouched. A small notebook was missing. "A notebook," Wolf repeated. Brenner nodded. Clark saw him writing in it at the desk. A list, maybe, names. The clerk did not read it. "Now it is gone." Wolf's gaze shifted to me. "Archie." "Yeah," I said. "You will find the notebook." I opened my mouth to object, then closed it. Wolf does not ask for miracles. He asks for work. Inspector Brenner pointed a finger at me. "You stay away from the hotel. I will do my best," I said. "I hate hotels. Too many towels." Brenner's finger stayed in the air. "This is police business." Wolf's voice was quiet. "Then conduct it competently." Brenner's finger dropped. He turned and walked out, Stebbins following with an apologetic look, like a boy who knows his father is wrong, but still has to live in the house. When the door shut, Wolf remained still for a moment, thinking. I waited. Silence in Wolf's office is not empty, it is loaded. Finally, Wolf spoke. "Mr. Lofaro's questions," he said, "are not those of a burglar. A burglar wants entry and escape. Lofaro wanted pattern. He wanted predictability. He wanted to know who lived alone and who kept regular hours." "A hunter," I said. "A coordinator," Wolf corrected. "Perhaps he was collecting information for others. Perhaps he was deciding whether a victim was suitable for a particular kind of approach. And now he is dead," I said. "Which means someone did not want him talking, or someone decided he knew too much." Wolf nodded once. "Yes." He tapped a fingertip lightly on the desk. "The chalk mark is part of a system of identification. A segment implies a whole. The mark on Mrs. Klein's door may be one portion of a larger symbol, a code that can be completed or modified." "A roster," I said again. Wolf's eyes sharpened. "A roster, or a map. Predators do not draw maps unless they intend to travel." I felt the case tighten the way a knot tightens when you pull the wrong end. A dead man across town, asking questions about who lived alone and when they left home, and a door in Riddle Street that drew its own chalk whisper at dawn. The simple symbol was not simple anymore. It was starting to look like a list, and lists are made so someone can check things off. Chapter 4. The geometry of a warning. Wolf's idea of fieldwork is asking Fritz whether the lamb should be braised or roasted. When Wolf tells me to go out before dawn with a ruler, it means he has stopped treating a thing as an annoyance and started treating it as a problem, which is worse for my sleep and better for my pride. He laid it out after dinner, with Fritz clearing plates like a conductor finishing a movement. "Archie," Wolf said, "you will obtain measurements." "From a chalk mark," I said. "From several chalk marks," he corrected. "Across several mornings, the height, the length, and the angle of the segment relative to the vertical plane of the door. You will record the results. You will not improvise." "I never improvise," I said. "I merely adapt heroically." Wolf's eyes did the small narrowing that is his version of a sigh. "Bring a ruler. Bring a protractor. Bring a notebook. Bring your attention." I went upstairs, and while Wolf went to his orchids for his evening ritual, I assembled equipment like a man preparing for war against stationery. Ruler, notebook, pencil, small plastic protractor, and a bit of clear tape for reference points. There are men who carry guns for comfort. I carry office supplies. The next morning started in the hour that ought to be illegal. At 5:10 I was in a cab with the city, still half asleep, New York at that time looks honest in a bleak way. Fewer faces, fewer lies. The streets are wet from street cleaners and old rain, and the lights make everything shine like it is guilty. At Riddle Street, the building's lobby smelled the same as before, cabbage and old varnish. With a faint undernote of disinfectant, the kind used to make people believe they are safe. I went upstairs quietly and took my position inside Mara Keline's apartment. She had agreed, after one firm conversation, to let me in each morning and then return to bed. She did not like it, but she liked not knowing even less. When she opened the door, her hair was loose and her face was pale with fatigue. That pale look was not weakness, it was the look of someone who has not been allowed to relax for weeks. "You are early," she whispered. "I am devoted," I whispered back. "Go back to bed. If you hear anything, do not come out." She nodded and moved away. I settled by the door with my notebook. At 6:01, the faint tap came again, the same small snap from within the door's hardware. I watched the inner mail flap. It gave the faintest tremor, then settled, like a guilty thought deciding to keep moving. I waited 10 seconds, then unlatched the chain and opened the door, just enough to see the outer surface. The mark was there, fresh, clean, and precisely placed. It might as well have been printed by a machine, which in a way it was. Now, I did what Wolf had told me, and I did it like a man with a mortgage to his employer's expectations. First, I measured height from the floor to the center of the segment's arc, 48 1/4 inches. Then I measured length of the segment itself, 1 7/8 inches. Then angle. Angle is a fussy thing. You cannot measure it accurately unless you define what you mean by it, and Wolf had, because Wolf enjoys defining things the way other men enjoy breaking them. I placed a strip of clear tape beside the mark, drew a small vertical reference line on the tape with pencil using the door's edge as a guide, then used the protractor to estimate the segment's tangent angle at its midpoint. It was not perfect, but it was consistent enough for a pattern. That first morning, I recorded it as 22 degrees from vertical, leaning slightly upward toward the hinge side. I wiped nothing. I touched nothing. I closed the door and sat back down with my notebook, waiting for the building to wake up and for the mark to vanish by noon. At 9:50, Dora Minks arrived. She knocked on Mara's door with the resigned rhythm of a woman who expects no thanks. Mara did not answer. I did. Dora stared at me as if I had moved into the hallway and declared myself landlord. "No cleaning," I told her. "Not today." Her lips tightened. "I got schedule." "I have a schedule too," I said. "Mine includes not letting strangers in." "I am not stranger," she said. "I clean." "I know. That is why it is convenient to use you. Convenient things get used first." She frowned hard enough to show she was either offended or frightened, possibly both. She turned and went away, muttering. At 11:30, Mrs. Pell opened her door and peered out. "It is still there," she said softly, nodding toward the mark, like it was a bad smell that had chosen a favorite corner. "Yes," I said. "So is the world." She looked at me. Then at Mara's door. "You think someone is going to come?" "I think someone is already here," I said, "just not where you can see them." She sniffed and shut her door. At 11:55, I watched the corridor. I watched it the way a man watches a poker table when he suspects marked cards. Nothing happened. No one approached, no hand lifted, no cloth wiped. At 12:06, I opened the door a crack. The mark was gone. Not smudged, not rubbed into a ghost, gone cleanly as if it had never been there. That was new. On previous reports, the mark vanished by noon, but we had not yet established whether it vanished by being wiped or by being avoided and then removed later. Now, I had eyes on it. It disappeared without anyone touching it in the hall. I examined the door surface where the chalk had been. There was no wetness, no residue, but there was something else. A faint powdery halo, as if chalk had been lifted away, instead of smeared. Magnets do not lift chalk, but adhesive can. Tape can, a thin film pressed over the chalk and peeled off, can remove it cleanly. The kind of film that could also be applied from the peephole. He went back inside and examined the peephole collar again. There was a faint sticky feel at its edge, as if something had pressed there recently. A second mechanism, a timed eraser. He wrote it down and tried not to swear out loud. The next morning, I did it again. Same dawn. Same tap, same quiet blink of the peephole collar. Psalm mark. Same height, 48 and 1/4 inches again. Length, 1 7/8 inches again. Angle this time, 26 degrees from vertical, leaning upward toward the hinge side, a little more pronounced, 2 mornings. Same height, same length, different angle. That is not the kind of variation you get by accident. Accidents are sloppy. This was tidy. Noon came. The mark disappeared again without hallway contact. Cleanly, efficiently. Third morning, same setup. Same calm fear in Mara Klein's eyes. Same tap at 6:01 mark appeared. Height and length unchanged. Angle 18 degrees. It had shifted the other way from the second morning, closer to vertical than the first, like a signal modulating. I took the numbers home to Wolf, like a man delivering a ransom note. Wolf was in the office with his after-lunch composure. Fritz had served shad roe that day, which always puts Wolf in a slightly better mood, as if food can offset humanity. I handed Wolf my notebook. He read the entries without speaking. Wolf reads the way a banker counts cash, with reverence for detail and contempt for carelessness. He looked up. The height is consistent. Yes, I said, to a 1/4 inch. The length is consistent. Yes, the angle varies. Enough to be deliberate, I said. Not enough to be sloppy. Wolf's eyes narrowed, and now he looked like himself again, the man who can make a chair feel like a throne. This is not a threat, Wolf said. Then it is a greeting, I said. Good morning, you are next. Wolf ignored that. The mark is a component of a code. The height identifies the target location. The angle communicates information. Information like what? I asked. The weather. The stock market. The superintendent's mood. Wolf's gaze stayed steady. Routines. I sat up a little. Routines. The deceased man, Wolf said. Frank Lofaro. He inquired about who lived alone and who kept regular hours. He was collecting patterns. The chalk mark is a way to record patterns where those involved can see them without speaking. I tapped the notebook, but no one sees it unless they are in the hallway. Wolf held up a finger, or unless they have a sightline, a window, a peephole opposite, a stair landing, or a person who passes by routinely, such as the cleaning woman, the superintendent, or a tenant who leaves at a certain time. Mrs. Pell, I said. She sees it when she is awake and nosy. Wolf made a small sound. Yes, also the disappearance without hallway contact suggests a second mechanism, a timed removal. Whoever constructed it prefers automation. That suggests not only intelligence, but a desire to reduce exposure, which suggests they are not just being clever for sport, I said. They are being careful because they are guilty. Wolf nodded once. The hand that draws it is not in the hallway. That part we already knew, I said. It is in the door. Wolf's eyes tightened. Number it is in the door. Someone has had repeated access to Mrs. Klein's hardware, whether from the hall undercover or from within. I felt my jaw tighten. I had been circling that fact like a dog circling a bad smell, but Wolf said it flat, as if the sentence itself was evidence. Then we changed the door's relationship with the world, I said. Wolf's eyes glinted. Precisely, Archie. Tomorrow you will not merely measure, you will prevent. You want me to stop the mark, I said. I want you to alter the conditions, Wolf replied. If the mark is produced through the male slot cavity, then altering the thread path there should affect it. If it still appears the method is different, that will inform me. And if I obstruct it, I said, the person behind it may notice and adjust. Wolf's mouth tightened. Indeed. That is also informative. Wolf, I said. This is not just chalk. We have a dead man. Somebody is making lists. Yes, Wolf said. And lists, as you observed, are made to check items off. The question is what they are checking. He reached for my notebook again and turned to the page with the angles. 18, he murmured. 20, 2, 26, not random. You see a pattern, I said. I see the possibility of one, Wolf answered. A code does not require a large alphabet. It requires consistency and shared understanding. I leaned forward. So what is the shared understanding? What does an angle tell a predator? Wolf's eyes met mine. It may tell when the occupant leaves, or returns, or whether someone else is present, or whether access has been obtained. I thought of Mara Klein's careful apartment, her quiet grief, her habit of leaving for work, coming back, turning her key. An angle could mean alone or not alone. It could mean easy or difficult. It could mean do it today. I also thought of Frank Lofaro's missing notebook names, routines, a list of lives made into entries, and I thought of the clean disappearance at noon, like a mouth closing after it has spoken. What about the hotel death? I asked. You think Lofaro was the organizer or the help? Wolf's lips compressed. He is dead. Therefore he has become either a warning or a liability eliminated. A warning to whom? I asked. Wolf's eyes flicked toward the window, as if the city outside might answer. To anyone who tries to leave the system, Wolf said. Or to anyone who threatens it. There was a pause. In that pause, Fritz's footsteps in the hall were the only sound, and even they seemed respectful. Wolf spoke again, quieter. Archie, I want the names of every tenant in that building, past and present, for at least 5 years. I blinked. That is not a favor you get by asking nicely. I am not asking nicely, Wolf said. I am instructing obtain the names, obtain the routines if possible, obtain any recent repairs, lock changes, complaints, the superintendent's records. If he keeps any, the cleaning woman's schedule, everything that can be quantified. Geometry, I said. Exactly, Wolf replied. The geometry of a warning is still geometry. It may be decoded. I stood. Tomorrow I block the peephole and see if the door still talks. Wolf nodded. Do so. And Archie. Yeah, do not underestimate the opponent. The crude may be dangerous, but the methodical is lethal. I left him to his chair, his numbers, and his certainty that a code can be broken if you stop treating it as a nuisance and start treating it as language. That night, as I set my protractor and ruler beside my bed like odd bedtime companions, I realized something I had been avoiding. Whoever was doing this was not just marking doors. They were measuring people. And now Wolf was measuring them back. Chapter 5. The mail slot trick. There are 2 kinds of doors in New York. The kind that keeps strangers out, and the kind that invites strangers to try. Mara Klein's door, with its cheap peephole and its little brass mail slot, had been pretending it was the first kind, while quietly auditioning for the second. Wolf had listened to my report on the angles with the expression of a man tasting soup for pepper. He did not speak for a full minute after I finished, which meant he was arranging facts in his head the way Fritz arranges a plate. Then Wolf asked a question that did not sound like Wolf, but was exactly Wolf. The door has a mail slot, he said. I blinked. Yes, it has an innocent mouth. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Inspect it. Inspect the slot, I said. The thing people shove catalogs through. Precisely, Wolf said. People always search for the clever. Often the effective is merely overlooked. So the next morning, instead of treating the slot as a clue, I treated the entire assembly like a confession waiting to be measured. I went to Riddle Street with a small flashlight, my ruler, my notebook, and the steady irritation of a man who has learned to hate dawn. Mara let me in without argument. Her face had that resigned calm of someone who has accepted that her life is being conducted by other people's curiosity. You are not sleeping, I said. I am trying, she replied. Try harder, I told her. I need you alive and reasonably sane. I sat near the door. At 6:01, the tap came, and the mark appeared. Same height, same clean curve. I recorded the angle, because Wolf had trained me into it. Then I ignored the peephole. I opened the door, checked the mark, shut it again, and crouched to examine the mail slot from the inside. The slot was brass, scuffed from years of envelopes and hands. Its inner flap hung on a simple hinge, and the lip of the metal frame met the painted wood with a narrow shadowed seam. I shone my flashlight along that seam. There, where no honest mail had any business leaving a trace, was a faint dusting of white, chalk dust clinging like a secret. I leaned closer. The dust was not scattered. It was concentrated along the inside edge of the metal lip, as if something had been dragged across it and had shed a little powder as it passed. I ran a fingertip gently along the lip and felt a shallow scratch, thin as a hair but long enough to mean purpose. It ran in a straight line for about an inch, then vanished beneath the frame, as if a thread had been pulled taut and sawn lightly against metal thread. Pully. The door was not just drawing, it was being operated. I sat back on my heels, suddenly wide awake. If you can run a thread from inside the apartment, through a tiny gap, around the mail slot hardware, and out to the door's outer surface, you can pull a chalk tip into place and draw a mark without ever opening the door and without ever stepping into the hallway. You could even do it with the resident inside asleep, if you had access earlier to install the setup. A shoelace and a sliver of chalk could make a fool of a stakeout. I stood, opened the door an inch, and examined the mail slot from the outside. The outer flap looked ordinary, but around its lower edge there was a faint white smudge that could have been chalk or could have been nothing. In a case like this, nothing is always suspicious. I closed the door and went back inside. With my pocket knife, I eased the inner flap up, careful not to bend it. Under the flap, in the shadowed cavity where the metal met the door, I saw another faint line of white dust, and caught briefly by my flashlight beam. A tiny glint, a staple, not a full staple, not a tidy one, just a small U-shaped piece of metal pressed into the wood at an angle, the kind you might use to guide a thread. I did not pull it. I did not touch it. I merely stared at it until my irritation turned into certainty. Marat's voice came from behind me. "What is it?" I straightened and looked at her. "Your door has been turned into a puppet." She frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means the chalk mark does not require someone in the hallway," I said. "It requires someone who has arranged a thread and guide system inside the door, probably near the mail slot, so a chalk tip can be slid into position and dragged along the surface." Her eyes widened. "Like a fishing line." "Exactly," I said. Quiet. Clean, invisible, and it would explain why I heard no footsteps and still found a mark. Mara stared at her door as if it might open its mouth and answer. "Simone was in my apartment," she said again, but this time it sounded less like fear and more like anger. "Yes," I said, "or someone had access long enough to install the setup and then operate it from somewhere else." "From where else?" she asked. I glanced toward the door. "From inside your apartment, if they come in when you are away, or possibly from the mail slot itself if they can hook something in and pull. But the chalk dust is inside. The scratch is inside. The guide is inside. That makes it hard to do from the hall without spending time at your door." Time at her door was what no one had ever done, which meant the enemy did not need to stand in the corridor at dawn. He only needed a legitimate excuse to spend time at her door in daylight. I took my notebook, wrote down my observations, and told Mara to stay away from the door until I had talked to Wolf. Back at West 35th, Wolf was in the office, already at his desk, which told me he had been thinking about this while I was doing calisthenics with a flashlight. I reported chalk dust, where mail should not leave chalk, thread scratch along the metal lip, a likely guide staple. Wolf's eyes lit in that quiet way they do when a puzzle agrees to be solved. "The seam in the magician's coat," Wolf murmured. "You were right," I said. "The mail slot is the innocent mouth in a dangerous face." Wolf nodded once. It is rarely the most dramatic aperture that admits intrusion. It is the overlooked. He steepled his fingers. A thread and pulley device. Simple, reliable. It permits the chalk to be drawn without exterior presence. It also permits the angle to be varied slightly, depending on how the thread is guided. That fits, I said. Angle changes, height stays consistent. The guide points inside the door would fix the height, while the pull direction could shift the angle. Wolf looked at me with that steady certainty that makes you feel like a tool in a good workshop. Therefore, Wolf said, your stakeout failed because it was watching the wrong side of the door. I hate it when that happens, I said. I like my doors honest. Wolf ignored that. The question is now plain, he said. Who has access to the inside? Brenner, I said. Cleaning woman. Anyone with a copy. Anyone who stole a key. Anyone who took advantage of the husband before he died. Wolf's eyes narrowed. And the dead man, Frank Lafaro, a former tenant. He knew the building. He knew the door. He may have installed such a device in the past and left it. Or he may have returned to reactivate it, or he may have been the one threatened by it. You think he could be a victim of the same system, I said. I think he asked questions like a man who was either hunting or being hunted, Wolf replied. Now he is dead. That suggests his questions were not appreciated. Wolf leaned back slightly, and I could tell he was building an arrangement of people in his head. Wolf does not chase suspects. He places them, as if each one is a chess piece and the board is his office. Archie, he said, you will do two things. First, you will acquire the building's tenant roster, including former tenants, for several years. Names, approximate ages, occupations if possible. Second, you will determine who among them had reason to know the door's construction and weaknesses. I grimaced. That is a lot of polite snooping. It is necessary, Wolf said. The door has been turned into a signaling device that implies repeated access and confidence. Whoever did this believes they can enter Mrs. Klein's apartment when she is absent. And if they can, I said, the chalk mark is not the worst thing they can do. Wolf's eyes hardened. Precisely. I stood because sitting while Wolf thinks is restful, until you remember that Wolf's thinking usually ends with me doing something unpleasant. One more thing, Wolf said. Of course, I replied. Do not remove the device yet, Wolf said. Let it continue. If it is a signal, we must see who receives it. You want me to let a predator keep sending messages, I said. I want the predator to believe he is unseen, Wolf replied. Then he will become careless. Carelessness is confession. I nodded. I did not like it, but I understood it. Wolf was not trying to stop chalk. Wolf was trying to catch the hand behind it, and the hand was hidden behind locks, routines, and a building full of people who knew how to keep quiet. As I went to my desk to make calls and start prying a tenant list out of a superintendent who would rather swallow his own keys, I looked at Wolf in his chair. His eyes had that narrowed focus that means the world outside has become, for him, a diagram. The door on Riddle Street had been made into a signaling device with a thread and a sliver of chalk. No, the only real question was simple enough to say and hard enough to live with. Who had been on the inside long enough to tie the knot? Chapter 6. 3 meanings in one white line. Wolf does not merely solve puzzles. He resents them. He resents their presumption, their untidiness, their demand that he interrupt a civilized day to address an uncivilized mind. When Wolf takes an interest, it is not because a thing is clever, it is because a thing is purposeful, and purpose always has a human attached to it. That afternoon, after I had made 3 phone calls, been lied to twice, and been promised a tenant roster once with the sincerity of a man offering a kidney, Wolf sat in his chair and stared at my notebook as if it were a menu and he suspected the kitchen. You have given me heights and angles, Wolf said. I even gave you my sleep, I replied. Wolf ignored that. He tapped a finger lightly on the page where I had recorded the angles from 3 mornings. 1822, 26, he said, plus the day you did not ask me to measure because you were still pretending to be annoyed. I said. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Do not be impertinent. Those three are sufficient to suggest a code, a practical code. A chalk Morse, I said. Not Morse, Wolf corrected. Simpler. A code intended to be read casually by someone passing. An angle is immediate. It requires no tools. It requires only agreement. I leaned back in my chair and watched Wolf do what he does best, which is take the world's mess and force it into neat lines until it behaves. He stood up, which is always a small event in our house, and crossed to the side table where I kept scratch paper. He did not pace. Wolf does not pace. He relocates. He drew 3 short strokes on the paper with a pencil, each one at a different angle, then held the paper up for a moment, as if it were a painting. 3 states, Wolf said. Like a traffic light, I offered. Go stop, get hit by a taxi. Wolf's mouth tightened. Like a household, alone, asleep, absent. I sat up. You think the angles correspond to her status? I do not think, Wolf said. I infer. Consider the requirements. The predators require information, not poetry. They require a simple, dependable signal that indicates vulnerability. They do not require the widow's feelings. They require her condition. Alone, I said, is one condition. Yes, Wolf replied. Another is asleep. Another is not home. 3 states are sufficient for practical predation. I pictured the mark on the door, not as a threat to Mara Klein, but as an announcement about her, like a crude advertisement. That idea made my throat tighten. You are saying her door is a bulletin board, I said. Precisely, Wolf answered. Not for her, but for the right eyes. A quiet street, language, a broadcast to those who know to look. I stared at the 3 pencil strokes Wolf had drawn. They were nothing. They were also everything. Steep, Wolf said, tapping the first. Indicates alone. Level indicates asleep. Slanted indicates not home, or some similar mapping. The exact assignment may differ, but the principle stands. The mark's angle changes because the situation changes. The height remains constant because the location remains constant. The door is the address. The angle is the message. I let out a breath. And someone is updating the message, I said. Yes, Wolf replied, and now his eyes narrowed to slits. Which requires access and observation. Either someone enters to adjust the apparatus, or the apparatus has multiple settings and is operated by thread from within, or the message is set during the day for the next dawn based on what was observed the prior evening. You mean someone could watch her, I said, learn her routine, then set the angle before leaving. Wolf nodded once. Or someone could be inside her building with opportunity to observe and access. A tenant, a superintendent, a cleaning woman, a visitor who has become familiar. That was the part that made my skin crawl, because it meant the danger was not an outsider with a dramatic face. It was someone who belonged in the building enough to be invisible. I told Wolf what I had done that morning, besides measuring. I had looked at the mail slot. I had found chalk dust and the thread scratch. I had found a likely guide staple. I had left it alone, as ordered. Wolf listened, and then did something that always means trouble for me. He smiled. It was not a broad smile. Wolf does not do broad. It was a small inward curve of the mouth that meant he had found the hidden seam in the magician's coat, and now he was deciding whether to tear it open politely. Excellent, Wolf said. Do not say that, I told him. When you say that, I end up in places with bad lighting. You will endure, Wolf replied. He sat back down and folded his hands. Now we consider the dead man, Frank Lofaro. Former tenant, I said. Dead in a hotel notebook, missing. Asked questions about who lived alone and who kept regular hours. Wolf's eyes hardened. Those questions were not idle. They are consistent with the use of this door signal. Mr. Lofaro may have been involved in creating the system, or he may have been investigating it, or he may have attempted to exploit it independently. Or he got in the way, I said. Indeed, Wolf replied. Summonen killed him. That indicates stakes. Harassment does not kill. Organization kills. Control kills. I frowned. You think it is organized targeting? It is, Wolf said flatly. A thief may take advantage of an unlocked window, but a systematic predator harvests vulnerability. He collects it, catalogs it, sells it, shares it, or uses it repeatedly. The chalk line is an index. It turns a human into a condition. I did not like the way that sounded, because it sounded true. And the mark disappears by noon, I said cleanly. That means someone wants it seen only within a certain window. Wolf's eyes flicked to mine. Yes, a delivery of information after it is read. It is erased. That is not childish. That is procedure. I leaned forward. So who reads it? Who is in position to read it? That, Wolf said, is now our primary question. I had already started that job. I told Wolf what little I had managed so far. The superintendent had not given me the roster, but I had gotten names the old way, by talking to people who cannot resist talking when they think they are helping themselves. Mrs. Pell, the young party couple in 5D, a man in 4A who worked nights, a woman in 2C who walked her dog at dawn, a deliveryman who made rounds and remembered faces because faces tip better than addresses. Names, habits, small details that could turn into a map if you were the wrong kind of person. Wolf listened, and when I finished he sat in silence for a long moment, eyes half closed, thinking in angles. Finally he spoke. Archie, a code is useless without a community of readers, I nodded. So we find the readers. We find the readers, Wolf confirmed. We find who knew to look at Mrs. Klein's door in the morning. We find who could enter her apartment to install or adjust the apparatus. We find who had reason to know her status, alone, asleep, absent. And we find who had reason to kill Frank Lofaro, I added. Yes, Wolf said. Because his death is not incidental. Either he threatened the system, or he misused it, or he attempted to leave it. I stared at my desk blotter and tried to picture Lofaro, a man asking questions in a hotel lobby, writing in a notebook, then ending up dead with no struggle. Poison, maybe, a needle, a quiet method, the kind of method used by people who prefer control. A system like this, I said slowly, does not feel like a lone creep with a stick of chalk. Wolf's eyes narrowed. It does not, which means we must consider motive beyond theft. Theft is crude. This is refined. You mean the targets may be chosen for a reason, I said. Wolf nodded once. Yes, women alone, regular hours, predictable, but also perhaps something else. Something that makes them desirable to the predators. I did not like that line of thought, so I tried to steer it back to something I could punch. Brenner, I said. He has access. He is evasive. He lies poorly, which is why he may be a tool, Wolf said. Or a decoy. The obvious is often employed to distract. Dora Minks, I said. She wiped the mark once. She has access, but she seems more scared than clever. Wolf nodded. Fear is not exculpatory, but it is informative. And Mrs. Pell, I said, nosy enough to see. She might know more than she says. Wolf's lips pressed together. Mrs. Pell is a spectator, but spectators can become messengers. I sat back. So what is next? Wolf's gaze was steady. We test the code. We create conditions. You want to stage her status, I said. Precisely, Wolf replied. If the angle indicates a state, then altering the state should alter the angle. If it does, we confirm the code. If we confirm the code, we can manipulate it. I felt a chill, and not from the weather. You want to send a false message, I said. Wolf's mouth tightened in that small, satisfied way again. Yes. So whoever reads it will react, I said. Exactly, Wolf answered. Predators are cautious, but they are also opportunists. If they believe Mrs. Klein is absent when she is not, they may attempt entry. If they believe she is asleep, they may attempt something else. In either case, they will reveal themselves. And if they are smart, I said, they will suspect a trap. Wolf's eyes narrowed. That is why the trap must be elegant. I had to admit it was a Wolf word. Elegant. He does not like brute force. He likes turning a man's own logic against him. I stood up. All right. I will go back to Riddle Street. I will find out who is watching her. I will find out who can read the code, and I will find out who can get inside without making noise. Wolf nodded once. Good, and Wolf, I said. Yes. This started as a chalk mark, I said. Now it is a bulletin board for predators and a dead man with a missing notebook. How far do you think it goes? Wolf's eyes held mine. As far as the greed of the predators and the silence of the community. I left him there with his 3 pencil strokes, which looked harmless on paper and ugly in the world. Outside, New York kept its usual pace, taxis hissing on wet streets, people pretending their routines were private. Somewhere on Riddle Street, a door was whispering its status in chalk each morning, and someone who knew the language was reading it like a menu. Now we had to find the reader, and we had to do it before Mara Klein became an item checked off. Chapter 7. The building that talks if you want facts in New York. Do not ask the people who own them. Ask the people who sweep around them. Riddle Street's building had the usual cast, tenants who believed privacy was a birthright, a superintendent who believed questions were an insult, and a handful of workers who saw everything because their job was to notice what respectable people trained themselves to ignore. The building did not have a doorman in the glamorous sense, but it did have a night watchman who sat in the lobby after dark with a radio, a thermos, and the tired authority of a man who thinks trouble is just another tenant. That was where I started, because a lobby is a throat. Things pass through it. Things get stuck in it. And if a building is talking, the lobby hears the first words. The watchman's name was Leon Pask. He was in his late 50s, neatly dressed, with a face that looked carved from patience, and a gaze that did not miss much. His chair was positioned so he could see the front entrance, the mailboxes, and the stairs. He looked at me the way a doorman looks at a man without luggage. "You live here?" he asked. "No," I said. "That is why I am still smiling." He gave a small grunt that might have been a laugh in a past life. "What do you want?" "A conversation," I told him. "And if we are lucky, a memory." He shrugged. "Sit." I sat on the lobby bench, which had the texture of furniture chosen by someone who disliked comfort on principle. "You been here long?" I asked. 2 years, he said. "Nights only." "Good," I said. "Nights are when people forget to act innocent." He watched me carefully. "You a cop?" "If I were, I would not be sitting on this bench," I said. "I am Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe." That name does not open every door, but it opens enough to be useful. Leon's eyebrows lifted a fraction. "That fat detective," he said. "That is him," I replied. "He prefers the term substantial." Leon snorted. "So what brings him to this dump?" "A chalk mark on a door," I said, "and a man dead in a hotel." Leon's eyes sharpened. "Dead man." "Former tenant," I told him. "Frank Lofaro." Leon's face did not change much, but the muscles around his mouth tightened as if he had swallowed something bitter. "I heard about that," he said. "Police came asking." "What did you tell them?" I asked. "Same as I tell everybody," he replied. "I see what I see." "Then tell me what you see," I said. "Who comes in early mornings? Who lingers? Who looks at doors like they are menus?" Leon leaned back a little, assessing whether I was worth the trouble. "The mailman comes early," he said finally. 6:30 sometimes. Maintenance guy comes if boiler acts up. Tenants go out for work. Kids come in late. That is all. "That is the brochure," I said. "I want the footnotes." Leon's eyes stayed on mine. "You asking about Mrs. Klein?" "Her door," I corrected. "Yes." He hesitated. "I seen her. Quiet. Alone. Comes and goes. Same times mostly." "Has anyone asked you about her routine?" I asked. Leon's gaze shifted briefly toward the building office door. It was shut, as it should be at that hour, but the look was not accidental. "People ask stupid questions," he said. "Who?" I asked, gentle. He exhaled. "A couple times some guy comes in. Says he looking for a friend, middle 30s, neat coat, clean shoes. I say which friend. He says he forgot the number, laughs. I tell him get out. How many times? I asked. 3, Leon said. Over a month. Same guy. Did he look at the tenant directory? I asked. Leon nodded once. He looked too long. Did he ever go upstairs? I asked. No, Leon said firmly. Not while I was here. He left when I watched him. That was useful, but it did not install a device inside a door. It did tell me someone was shopping. What about maintenance requests? I asked. Work orders? Repairs? Anyone fussing with doors? Leon shrugged. That is office business. You ever see anyone carrying tools at odd hours? I asked. Leon's lips pressed together. Super brings contractors sometimes. Says they doing locks. I do not like it, but he says it is building. Superintendent Brenner, I said. Leon nodded. He likes to do things without telling tenants. Makes him feel important. Does he have a boss? I asked. Leon's eyes flicked again to the office. Building manager, Miss Sloane. That name was new. It sounded like the kind of name printed on letterhead, crisp and expensive. Tell me about Miss Sloane, I said. Leon's mouth tightened. She comes twice a week, neat, smells like money. Talks like she is doing you a favor by breathing your air. Does she sign things? I asked. Leon blinked. Sure. Work orders, notices, rent warnings. Does she have tidy handwriting? I asked, because sometimes you ask a question that sounds silly but makes the right person recall the right detail. Leon looked at me a second, then nodded slowly. Yeah, real neat, like she writes slow. I thanked him, gave him my card, and left the lobby with the feeling that the building had whispered its first secret. Not much, but enough to point my ear toward the building office. The mail carrier came next. If you want a map of the human condition, do not read philosophy. Ride with the mail. I caught him at 6:30 the next morning. As promised, a thin man with quick movements, a satchel that could have held bricks, and an expression of permanent hurry. His name was Luisa Estrada, and he did not like being delayed by anything that was not stamped. 2 minutes, I told him, walking alongside as he worked the boxes. That is all I need. He glanced at me. If you are selling something, no. I sell only irritation, I said. You deliver it. We have common ground. That got me a fraction of a smile. I am asking about a door on the 3rd floor, I said. Do you ever see markings on it in the morning? He snorted. I see all kinds of things. People tape notes. People leave flyers. People paint over paint. This is chalk, I said, a small curved line. His eyes narrowed in thought. Yeah, I seen that. Not always, sometimes it there, sometimes not. Do you see anyone watching doors? I asked. Louis shook his head. I do not watch people. People watch me. Everybody wants their mail like it is oxygen. Have you ever had trouble with the mail slot on that door? I asked. That got his attention. Mail slot is stiff, he said, hard to push through. I curse it. Since when? I asked. He shrugged. Month, maybe, before it was fine. Did you report it? I asked. He made a face. To who? I got root. I do not make friends. Did anyone tell you it was being repaired? I asked. No, he said. Then, after a beat, but one day I come and slot felt smoother, like oil, and there was new shine on the brass. Someone cleaned it. That was a nice little detail. A door does not clean itself. Someone had been working on it. Next I talked to maintenance, which in that building meant 2 men and a rolling cart of tools that looked like it had survived the war. One of them, a stocky fellow named Everett Jakes, had the calm of a man who has seen leaks, rats, and tenants in bathrobes, and now fears nothing. Mail slot, I said, when I cornered him in the basement near the boiler room. Samanan worked on it. 3B, I said. Mara Klein. Everett's face shifted. Not surprise. not confusion, recognition. That was on a ticket, he said. A ticket, I repeated. Work order, he said. Came down from the office, said mail slot repair. Loose flap. Did Mrs. Klein request it? I asked. He shook his head. Number, we do not take tenant requests, direct. Goes through office. When did you do the work? I asked. Everett scratched his chin. 2-3 weeks. I went up with my partner. We looked at it, and I said carefully, "What did you do?" He shrugged, tightened screws, cleaned oiled hinge, took flap off a minute. Put it back. Took flap off, I repeated. Yeah, he said, casual. 2 screws. Quick. And did you work on the inside of the door? I asked. Everett frowned now, because he heard where I was going and did not like it. Inside, he said. We were in the hall. Tenant was not home. We do not go inside apartments unless there is a leak. So you did not enter, I said. No, he said firmly. We do not go in, that mattered. The mail slot could be manipulated from the hallway. The flap could be removed from the exterior side, giving access to the cavity behind it. A thread could be guided. A staple could be placed if you had a small tool and a quiet minute. A device could be installed without entering the apartment if you were clever, and if you had an excuse for being at the door with tools like a work order. Who signed the work order? I asked. Everett jerked his head toward a clipboard hanging on a nail. They keep copies sometimes. You want to see? I wanted to see. He pulled a carbon copy from under a clip, smudged and worn, and handed it to me. At the top, typed, was a standard header, Ridgeway Property Management, Rhode Island, Daddle Street Building, Massachusetts in tenant's request. Under, unit. It said 3B, under, issue. It said mail, slot repair, Florida, app loose, California using delivery problems, under, authorized by. There was a signature, tidy, neat, almost proud Sloan. Everett watched my face. Something wrong. Possibly, I said. Did you see Miss Sloan that day? He shook his head. She does not come down here. She does not like the smell. Did anyone accompany you to the 3rd floor? I asked. No, he said. Just me and Benny. Benny, I said. Where is Benny? Everett nodded toward a side door. He is upstairs, fixing a light. I thanked Everett, gave him my card, and went upstairs to find Benny. Benny turned out to be a wiry man with quick hands and nervous eyes. He kept glancing down the hall as if expecting someone to step out of a wall. When I asked him about the work order, his face tightened. Yeah, he said. Yeah, he said. We did it. So what? Did you notice anything odd about the mail slot? I asked. He shook his head too fast. Numbered. Did you see chalk? I asked. His eyes flicked to mine. Chalk. White dust, I said, on the metal. He swallowed. Number. I watched him for a second. He was lying, but not from malice, from fear. Fear has a smell. Benny smelled like it. Benny, I said, lowering my voice, if someone used a work order to mess with a tenant's door, you and I are on the same side. You are not the target, you are the tool, and tools get blamed. He licked his lips. We did not do nothing. I did not say you did, I said. I asked what you saw. He hesitated, then spoke quietly. There was dust, white dust. On the inside lip. Everett said it was old paint. He wiped it. How long were you at the door? I asked. 10 minutes, Benny said. Maybe 15. We took flap off, cleaned it, put back. Everett went down once to get oil. I stayed. Alone at the door with tools, alone with a convenient excuse, alone long enough for a man with a plan to add a guide staple and thread without looking like he was doing anything but repairs. Did anyone pass while you stayed? I asked. Benny shook his head. A lady opened door across hall, looked, shut it, that is all. Mrs. Pell, I said, more to myself. Benny nodded. Maybe. I do not know names. I thanked him, and I left before his nerves turned into something louder. By late morning, I had what Wolf needed. A clear access route that did not require sneaking into Maraclean's apartment at all. A work order, authorized through the building office, could put a man with tools at her door for as long as he liked. He could install the thread and guide system through the mail slot cavity. He could do it in daylight, with no need for footsteps at dawn. The door itself would then broadcast whatever message he had set for it. And the authorization had a signature, neat as a business card and dirty as sin. Back at West 35th, Wolf listened without interrupting. His face remained calm, but his eyes sharpened as I described the work order, the signature, and the little timeline of a maintenance man left alone at the door. When I finished, I handed him the carbon copy. Wolf held it as if it were a delicate object, which it was, because it was a piece of paper that could bring down a building. Sloan, Wolf said. Building manager, I confirmed. Tidy handwriting, untidy morals, if our luck holds. Wolf nodded once. This is the shape of an inside job. It could still be Brenner, I said. He could have pushed the request through, or he could be working with her. Yes, Wolf said, but now we have an administrative channel. The apparatus was installed under cover of legitimacy that implies planning and authority, and it explains how no one approached the door at dawn, I said. The action was loaded earlier. The door did the talking later. Wolf's mouth tightened. Buildings gossip if you know where to put your ear. You have put yours in the right place. I felt an odd little satisfaction at that, because Wolf's compliments are rare and therefore valuable, like diamonds or free parking. What now? I asked. Wolf looked at the work order again. Now we confront the building's management with a fact that cannot be shrugged, but we do it at the proper time, with the proper witnesses. You want to bring the police? I said. I want them available, Wolf replied. This is no longer merely an irritation. It is organized predation, and it has already produced a corpse. He looked up at me. Archie, you will speak to Miss Sloan. I stared. Me? Yes, Wolf said. You are better suited to withstand her personality. Also, she will underestimate you. That is useful. She will underestimate me, I agreed. Most people do. It saves time. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Do not threaten her. Do not accuse her. Invite her. Offer her the opportunity to explain. Explain why she authorized a mail slot repair for a widow who did not request it, I said. Exactly, Wolf replied. If she lies, we will learn how she lies. If she tells the truth, we will learn whom she fears. I stood, already hearing my own sigh. And Wolf, I said. Yes. This building is talking, I said. But it is talking to someone who knows the language. We still need to find the reader. Wolf's gaze was steady, cold and confident. We will. The reader is part of the community, and now we have found the bulletin board's caretaker. I left the office with Wolf's plan forming like a net. Somebody in the building office had filed an unauthorized repair request, signed in tidy handwriting. That request put a worker at Maraclean's door long enough to install a thread and pulley device. The door became a signaling machine. Now we had a manager's name and the shape of an inside job. And when an inside job goes bad, it goes bad from the inside out. Chapter 8. A trap built. From routine, Wolf's traps are never theatrical. If you want theatrical, you go to Broadway and pay extra to watch a man pretend he is dying with good posture. Wolf prefers a trap that looks like nothing, because nothing is what careful people trust. A careful man avoids a spotlight. He walks straight into a shadow and believes he is safe. He explained it after dinner, while Fritz cleared plates with the quiet dignity of a man who knows. There is no justice in the world, but there is order in a kitchen. You will not obstruct the apparatus, Wolf said. You will document its use. I have been documenting, I told him. I have a notebook full of angles and a spine full of complaints. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Your spine is irrelevant. The transmission is relevant. A chalk line is a signal. A signal requires a method. The method leaves traces. Your task is to make the traces visible without making the trap visible. "You want me to catch a thief with a blank sheet of paper," I said. Wolf's mouth tightened. "With routine. Routine is heavier than paper." So at 5 the next morning I was back on Riddle Street, with the kind of kit a schoolteacher carries and a burglar fears. I had a thin strip of envelope paper cut, narrow enough to hide inside the mail slot cavity, a small brush, tweezers, and a pinch of fine kitchen powder from Fritz that clung politely and did not sparkle unless you held it at the right angle. I also had patience, which is not a tool, but it should be sold in hardware stores. Mara Klein let me in at 5:20. She looked like a woman who had been living on half sleep and full suspicion. "How much longer?" she asked. "That depends on how fast the guilty become careless," I said. "Sit down and stay away from the door. If you want to help, breathe quietly." She gave me a look that could have curdled milk, then sat on the sofa with her hands folded. She watched me the way a person watches a man disarming a bomb, with respect and resentment mixed together. I crouched by the inside of her front door and lifted the inner mail flap with care. In the seam where brass met wood, the faint white chalk dust was still there, and the little guide staple I had spotted earlier caught a glint from my flashlight. It was small, neat, and placed by someone who had spent time at that door with tools and without fear of interruption. I did not remove the staple. Removing it would tell the operator he had been detected. What I wanted was not silence. I wanted confession first. I slid my thin strip of paper into the mail slot cavity from the inside, laying it across the shadowed space like a tongue. It did not block mail. It did not show from the hallway. It simply occupied the path a thread or chalk tip might take. Paper is honest. It does not argue. It records. Next, I dusted the area around the guide staple and the inside metal lip with the faintest veil of powder, applied with the brush as delicately as frosting on a cake you do not intend to eat. I did not want a snowfall. I wanted a whisper, enough to cling to a moving thread or a finger, enough to show direction, not enough to announce itself. Then I sat down near the door and waited. The building was in its pre-dawn mood, quiet but not peaceful. Pipes clicked like old knuckles. The elevator made a soft cough and settled. Somewhere above, a radiator sighed. The city outside was beginning to thin the dark, but the hallway stayed grey, as if it did not trust daylight. At 6:01, I heard the small tap. Not a footstep, not a door. A brief internal snap, like a tiny decision being executed. I stood, opened the door a careful inch, and checked the outside. The chalk mark was there again, fresh and clean, the curve set at its insulting little angle. I shut the door and went immediately to the mail slot. The mark itself was no longer the mystery. The method was. I lifted the inner flap and looked at my paper strip. It had moved, not much. A few millimeters, but enough to show something had passed. Along one edge was a faint grey streak, the kind made by a slender object sliding with dust on it. Near the center was a tiny curved scuff, as if the edge of a chalk tip had brushed and turned. I held the strip closer to the light. The scuff became clearer, shallow but distinct. Not random, not mail, not air. Then I checked the powder. A thin line had been cut through it, clean and narrow, starting near the guide staple and running toward the inside lip of the slot, then vanishing into the seam. A thread line under tension, pulled or shifted at dawn. That meant two things. First, the mail slot cavity was being used as a conduit, exactly as Wolf had suspected. Second, the device was not merely a timed spring left to perform like a clockwork bird. Something was being engaged, triggered, or adjusted with a move that left a track. I replaced the strip in the same position as best I could and sat down again. Predators do not only broadcast, they check. They verify that their signal remains readable. They correct what time and weather try to erase. By 8:30 the building began to wake. Doors opened. Shoes shuffled. Voices rose and fell. Mrs. Pell opened her door a crack, looked toward Mara's door, and shut it again with a quickness that suggested she had learned fear from experience. At 9:40, the mail carrier arrived and wrestled the slot like it owed him money. He shoved 2 envelopes through, muttered something unprintable, and moved on. My strip did not interfere. Good. I wanted a trap, not a barricade. At 10, no cleaning woman came because Mara had been instructed not to let Dora Minx in. Innocent hands would only smear my proof. At 10:20. 5 footsteps climbed the stairs with measured confidence. Not a tenant in a rush, not a worker dragging a cart. This was the sound of someone who expected hallways to make room. A woman appeared at the top of the stairs, neat coat, expensive bag, hair arranged to look effortless, which always means effort. She carried herself like the building's conscience and assumed the building owed her gratitude. She looked at Mara's door a fraction longer than a casual glance. That fraction was enough. "Good morning," she said, and her voice had the bright tone of someone issuing a memo. "Morning," I said. "Can I help you?" "I am Helen Sloan," she replied. "Building management, and you are?" "Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe." Her smile tightened, not in friendliness, but in calculation. The name had landed. "How interesting," she said. "Why is Mr. Wolfe interested in my building?" "Because a widow's door keeps speaking in chalk," I said, "and because a former tenant turned up dead." Her expression did not collapse, but the skin at her hairline took on a faint sheen. Sweat is always more honest than speech. "How dreadful," she said. "I am here for a routine inspection. We are reviewing doors and hardware. There have been complaints about mail delivery." "Then you have chosen a fine door," I said. "The mail slot has had attention recently." Her eyes sharpened. "Excuse me, the repair request," I said, "the one Mrs. Klein did not authorize." She held her posture, but her breath changed. A quick intake, controlled, then released. "Tenants complain. Carriers complain. We respond," she said. "That is our responsibility. It is also your responsibility not to use a repair request as cover to tamper with a tenant's door," I said. "There is chalk dust inside the slot cavity, and a thread has left scratches along the metal lip. Someone turned the door into a signaling device." Her eyes widened slightly before she gathered them back. The crack was small. It was real. "This is absurd," she said quickly. "You are making accusations." "I have made observations," I replied. "Accusations come later when they have company." She stepped toward Mara's door. "I will speak to Mrs. Klein." "She is not receiving surprise inspections," I said, and I shifted so I was still polite and still in the way. "If you have business, leave a note." "A note," she repeated, as if the word offended her. "Slip it through the mail slot," I said pleasantly. "It should be smooth after all that repair." Her nostrils flared. She did not like that slot. She did not want to touch it in front of me. That told me more than any denial. "I will return with the superintendent," she said. Voice clipped with proper notice. "You do that," I said. "Bring a calendar, bring a conscience." She gave me a look sharp enough to peel paint, then went down the stairs, heels striking each step like punctuation. When she was gone, the hallway felt quieter, as if the building had held its breath and then let it out. Inside Mara's apartment, she stood pale and rigid. "She has never come to my door before," Mara said. "No," I agreed. "Routine inspections do not usually require sweat." I showed her the paper strip with its scuff and the powder track line. She stared at them as if they were a foreign language she wished she had never learned. "Someone is using my home like a sign," she said. "Yes," I told her. "And now the sign's caretaker has noticed someone reading it too closely." I called Wolfe and reported the trap's result and Sloane's visit. "Invite Miss Sloane to my office this afternoon." "And if she refuses?" I asked. "Then we give Inspector Brenner reason to insist," Wolfe replied. I hung up and looked at Mara's door. Ordinary paint, ordinary brass, an ordinary mail slot that had become a secret channel for predators. The trap had been built from routine and nothingness. It had done its job. Now the net was tight enough that the next pull would not be gentle. Chapter 9. The Hotel Room Debt. If you have never watched Nero Wolfe build a conclusion, you might think he pulls answers out of thin air, The way a stage magician pulls rabbits out of hats. That is flattering and wrong. Wolf does not pull wolf stacks. He stacks facts, habits, motives, and small betrayals until the structure can no longer pretend to be anything else. The morning after Helen Sloane's sudden routine inspection, Wolf had me at my desk with a list of names, a list of times, and a list of questions. His questions were always the kind that sound easy until you try to answer them without lying. "Archie," Wolf said, "we must stop treating Mr. Lefaro as an originator." I looked up. "The dead former tenant." "Yes," Wolf replied. He asked questions, compiled information, and carried a notebook. Yet he did not conceal his identity when he checked into that hotel. He paid cash, but he used his name. That is not the conduct of a mastermind. It is the conduct of a man who believes he is protected. "Or a man who is sloppy," I said. Wolf's lips tightened. "Sloppy men do not inquire about cameras and sightlines. Sloppy men blunder." This man gathered. He observed. He reported. He was not a designer. He was an instrument. "A courier," I said slowly. Wolf nodded once. "A go-between paid to watch and report." I sat back and let that settle. Frank Lefaro, dead in a hotel room with no struggle, no note, and a missing notebook. A man who knew the building's habits because he had once lived there. A man who knew how to ask the right questions without sounding like a predator. A man who could be paid to trade information without ever getting his hands dirty. "And he got killed," I said. "Because he became a liability, or because he attempted to become an entrepreneur," Wolf replied. "In commerce, greed is the most common cause of death." Wolf said commerce, like it was a diagnosis. He had that look in his eyes that means he is not impressed by evil's imagination. To Wolf, most wrongdoing is merely bad accounting. I told him what I had managed to learn since the hotel death. I had called the hotel again, spoken politely to a clerk who did not want to speak, and learned one additional detail. The man Lefaro had met the evening before he died had not signed the register. He had waited in the lobby, spoken to Lefaro for 10 minutes, and then left. The clerk remembered him because he wore a work jacket and carried a small leather folder. The kind used by men who pretend their paperwork makes them respectable. "Work jacket," Wolf murmured. "A uniform is camouflage." "I also talked to Leon Pask," I said. "Night watchman," he says. "A neat man came in 3 times over a month, asking for a friend, looking at the directory too long. Never went upstairs." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "A shopper." "And we have Sloane," I continued, "a manager who signs work orders in tidy handwriting and shows up sweating when the door's signal is questioned." Wolf made a small sound of agreement. "Miss Sloane is not a street predator. She is a facilitator. She provides access and legitimacy." "That still leaves the muscle," I said, "the men who do the actual harm." Wolf looked at me. "Yes, and we will not look for them by prowling alleys. We will look for them by following the money and the procedure." Wolf's tone sharpened. "A ring small, practical. It trades in what you might call safe opportunities. Not daring robberies, not noisy attacks. Quiet predation. Target selection is everything. The chalk mark is not art. It is a daily status update. Steep level, slanted. Alone, asleep, absent. 3 meanings in one white line. A tiny bulletin board that only the right eyes could read. "Rot?" I said. Wolf's brows lifted slightly. "Commerce," he corrected. "Commerce," I repeated, tasting the word. "The kind that sells fear by the ounce." Wolf ignored my tone. He reached for his notepad and made a short list, not of suspects, but of roles. "Observer," he said, writing. "Installer reader, enforcer coordinator." He looked up. "We have evidence of an installer operating through authorized access, concealed by a work order that implicates Miss Sloane. We have evidence of a man compiling information and asking about routines. That was Mr. Lefaro. He was the observer, perhaps also the courier." "And the coordinator," I said, "is the one who paid him." "Yes," Wolf replied. "The coordinator is not likely to stand in hallways. He collects from others. He directs others. He threatens others when necessary. And the enforcer is the one who made Lofaro stop breathing, I said. Wolf nodded once. Calm. Yes. I asked the question that had been itching behind my teeth since the chalk mark became something uglier. How do you kill a man in a hotel room with no struggle, I said, and no sign? Wolf's mouth tightened. There are many quiet methods, a drink, a pill, a hypodermic, a gas introduced briefly. The medical examiner will determine the mechanism. But motive is clearer than method. Lofaro died because he owed a debt. A debt, I said. Wolf's eyes held mine. Yes, not money necessarily. A debt of silence. He was paid to carry information, not to own it. If he attempted to sell it elsewhere, or threatened to reveal it, he became a bad investment. Bad investments are written off. I leaned back and stared at the wall, seeing in my mind the hotel room across town. A bed, a body, a locked door. The city outside continuing as if a life ending was just another traffic signal. So he got scared or greedy, I said. Either he wanted more money, or he wanted out. Or he wanted to be important, Wolf said. And his tone made clear what he thought of that. Men like Lofaro believe that because they carry the message, they own the message. They are wrong. I thought of his missing notebook, names, apartment numbers, routines, vulnerabilities. The kind of information you do not want in anyone's pocket. What about the notebook? I said. Who took it? Wolf's eyes narrowed. The killer or someone acting for the coordinator. The notebook was evidence and merchandise. It could not be left with the corpse. That means the ring is careful, I said. Careful enough to erase chalk by noon, Wolf replied. Careful enough to use management channels for access. Careful enough to kill quietly, yes. He sat back, fingers steepled again, and now he looked satisfied in the way a man looks satisfied when he has named a thing correctly. This, Wolf said, is not random harassment. It is organized targeting, a small commerce in vulnerability. And Mara is a product, I said, hating the words as I said them. Wolf's voice remained steady. A candidate, yes. I felt anger flare, and I kept it contained because Wolf does not like heat near his reasoning. But my voice sharpened anyway. So we stop it, I said. Yes, Wolf replied. We stop it by forcing it into the open. We will not chase the ring through the city. We will make them come to us. With what? I asked. A badge, a gun, a sermon. With leverage, Wolf said calmly, and with the one thing commerce cannot resist. I frowned. Profit. Wolf nodded once. Exactly. Predators believe they are rational. They believe they are businesslike. We will offer them a transaction they cannot ignore. I stared. You want to bait them. I want to control the message, Wolf replied. If the chalk signal communicates a target status, we will falsify it. We will broadcast an irresistible state. We will do it in a way that convinces the reader the opportunity is real. Then we will watch who responds, and when. You are going to use Mara's door, I said. Yes, Wolf said. But not Mara. He lifted a hand, as if brushing away a concern. Mrs. Klein will not be endangered if we are competent. You, Archie, will be inside. The police will be available. And the coordinator, believing he is about to profit, will expose himself through his intermediaries. I exhaled. You are building a final office gathering in your head already. Wolf's eyes flicked with faint amusement. Naturally, a gathering is efficient. It compels speech and prevents flight. I could almost see it. Wolf in his chair, suspects seated, squirming, the truth dropped like a weight. But before we got to that civilized moment, we still had to drag the rot into the light. Who do you want in the room? I asked. Wolf's voice was crisp. Miss Sloane, the superintendent, the maintenance men, at least the one who was left alone at Mrs. Klein's door. Mrs. Pell, possibly, Mr. Leon Pask, if he will come, and Inspector Brenner, of course. And the coordinator, I said. Wolf's eyes narrowed. We will invite him without naming him. We will make him volunteer. I stood up, because sitting while Wolf plans is restful until you remember that his plans usually require me to be the hinge. "All right," I said. "How do we falsify the signal?" Wolf looked at my notebook of angles. "You will set the device. You have observed the thread path and the guide. You have seen how it is used. You will create the steepest, most promising angle, the one that, by my inference, advertises maximum vulnerability." "Alone?" I said. "Or absent," Wolf replied. "We will decide which by testing, but the point is to broadcast a state that attracts the predator. And when the predator comes," I said, "we catch him." Wolf's gaze was cold and sure. "Yes, we catch him. And when we catch him, we will have enough to dismantle the commerce that produced him." I left Wolf's office with a plan that felt clean in his mouth and dirty in my stomach. The dead former tenant was not a mastermind. He was a courier, a watcher, a man paid to turn lives into entries and routines into merchandise. He had collected information and carried it. And then, when he tried to keep it or sell it, he had paid his hotel room debt with his life. Wolf called it commerce. I called it rot. And now we were going to bait it, trap it, and drag it into Wolf's office, where it would have to speak in plain English, under good lighting, with witnesses present. Chapter 10. The simplest notice if you have never seen Nero Wolfe arrange an ending. You might picture drama, raised voices and men leaping from closets. Wolfe's idea of staging is closer to Fritz's. Everything is placed with care, nothing is wasted, and the only surprise is how anyone ever thought they could cheat the house. The brownstone was quiet in that late afternoon way that makes New York seem briefly civilized. Upstairs, the orchid room had already received its allotted attention, and Wolfe's mood was improved by that fact. Not because he loved orchids more than people, but because orchids rarely lie. Fritz moved through the hallway with the soft certainty of a man who believes that even crime should not interfere with dinner. By 4 o'clock my office chairs were aligned the way Wolfe liked them, which meant no one would sit where they wanted. The beer was cold. The desk blotter was clean. Wolfe sat in his chair as if he had been born there. If you did not know better, you would think we were hosting a dull committee meeting. We were, in a sense. Inspector Brenner had agreed to be nearby, which is police language for, "I will listen and then pretend I was essential." He and Sergeant Stebbins were in the front room with the door eased shut, close enough to hear and far enough to satisfy Brenner's pride. Wolfe had insisted. Wolfe always insists when he is right. The first arrival was Superintendent Brenner from Riddle Street, the man with the master key and the amateur conscience. He entered with a scowl, saw Wolfe, and tried to look like he had come voluntarily. The attempt failed. He sat when I pointed, grumbling under his breath. Benny followed. The wiry maintenance man. He looked as if he had been asked to carry a live cat in his coat. His hands kept opening and closing, as if he was practicing innocence. Leon Pask, the night watchman, came next. He had the calm face of a man who sees people at their worst and therefore is not impressed by their best. He sat, nodded to no one, and waited. Mrs. Pell arrived in a hurry, eyes bright, lips ready. Curiosity had dressed her in her best blouse. She sat at the edge of her chair like a woman, expecting entertainment. Helen Sloane arrived at 4:15 precisely, as if punctuality could act as a character reference. She wore the neat coat again, the expensive bag, and the tidy smile that made you feel you had been audited. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, "I assume this will be brief." "It will be," I told her. Wolfe likes brevity almost as much as being correct. She followed me into the office and stopped when she saw the assembled faces. Her eyes moved over them quickly, too quickly. A manager expects to control a room. She had just realized she was not the manager here. Wolfe did not rise. He did not offer a hand. He offered a chair with his voice. "Miss Sloane," Wolfe said, "sit down." She sat, posture stiff, smile careful. Wolfe regarded the room, then spoke as if he were reading a menu and knew the cook was nervous. "I have invited you," he said, "because the chalk mark on Mrs. Maracline's door is not a prank. It is a notice. It conveys information to a specific audience. It has been facilitated by access to the building and by paperwork that provided cover. Sloane's smile did not move. The superintendent shifted. Benny swallowed hard enough to be heard. Wolf continued. Additionally, Frank Lafaro, former tenant of apartment 3B, was found dead in a hotel room. Inspector Brenner informs me that the medical examiner has determined he was poisoned. That landed. People can ignore chalk. Poison makes them sit straighter. Mrs. Pell made a small sound, delighted and afraid at the same time. Leon Pask's expression did not change. Sloane's eyes flicked once to the door, as if she wanted to be elsewhere. Wolf turned his gaze on Sloane. "Miss Sloane," he said, "you signed a maintenance authorization for a mail slot repair on apartment 3B. Mrs. Klein did not request it." Sloane drew a breath. "We respond to complaints. The mail carrier reported difficulty." Wolf lifted a hand slightly. She stopped as if her words had hit glass. "We will not begin with justification," Wolf said. "We will begin with mechanism." He nodded toward me. "Archie." I opened my desk drawer and withdrew the evidence packet, which looked unimpressive, because evil usually is. I carried it to Wolf's desk and laid out the pieces slowly, so everyone could see them. The guide staple removed from the mail slot cavity, the length of waxed thread, the tiny loop that acted as a guide, and the chalk nub worn down to the size of a fingernail. Beside it I placed the paper strip from our trap, with its faint scuff. A confession made of string and chalk dust. Benny leaned forward despite himself. The superintendent's face tightened. Sloane's tidy smile vanished. Wolf spoke softly, and his softness was heavier than shouting. "This," he said, "is how the mark was made, a thread and pulley arrangement installed within the mail slot cavity. It permits the operator to slide chalk into position and draw a curved segment on the door's surface. The height remains consistent because the guides fix it. The angle varies because the pull direction varies." Mrs. Pell whispered, "My God," as if she had prayed for drama and received it. Wolf's eyes remained on Sloane. "Do you recognize this apparatus, Miss Sloane?" "I do not," she said quickly. "You do," Wolf replied. "Your fear is not of me. It is of the people who used you." Sloane's hands clenched on her bag. Her knuckles went white. That whiteness told the truth her mouth refused. Wolf turned his head slightly toward Leon. "Mr. Pask, you reported a man visiting the building at night, asking for a friend, studying the tenant directory." Leon nodded. "3 times, neat, clean shoes, talked like he belonged. That man did not come upstairs because he did not need to. He needed information. Frank Lafaro supplied information. You supplied access. The chalk mark supplied updates. The audience supplied appetite. Inspector Brenner stepped into the office doorway then, unable to stand being outside his own moment. Stebbins was behind him, eager as ever. "All right," Brenner snapped. "Enough talk, Miss Sloane. You want to explain why your signature is on a work order that led to a signaling device used to target tenants, and you want to do it now." Sloane's eyes went to the badge. Then away. "A badge is comforting only to people who believe the world is fair." Wolf's voice was calm. "Inspector, please, you will have your turn. For now, I want clarity, not volume." Brenner glared, but did not argue. Wolf had the facts, and Brenner knew it. Wolf leaned forward a fraction. "Miss Sloane, you have 2 choices. You may continue to deny what you know and accept the consequences when the police trace the work orders, the payments, and the access. Or you may speak while speaking still protects you." Sloane's lips trembled. "Protects me from whom?" Wolf's eyes narrowed. "From the ring you fed." The superintendent made a choking sound. Benny's eyes widened. Mrs. Pell leaned forward so far she nearly toppled. Wolf's tone stayed even. Frank Lafaro was not killed because he knew nothing. He was killed because he knew something and threatened to use it. Poison in a hotel room is not passion. It is procedure. It is a debt collected quietly. Sloane's breath hitched. The sweat at her hairline returned. A faint sheen that made her tidy face look suddenly young and frightened. "I didn't know," she whispered. "You did," Wolf said. "You did not know the full extent, perhaps. But you knew enough," Brenner barked. Who? Sloane flinched as if the word had struck her. Wolf spoke again gently, which was his sharpest tool. "Miss Sloane, tell us who approached you." For a moment she stared at the chalk nub on Wolf's desk, like it might speak for her. Then her shoulders sagged, not in guilt but in surrender. "A man," she said. "He came to the office. He said there had been break-ins in other buildings. He said tenants were careless. He said he could help prevent trouble if I helped him identify patterns. He said it was only burglary." Wolf nodded once. "A familiar lie, continue." She swallowed. "He called himself Grant. I do not think that was his name. He paid me. Not much at first, then more. He wanted work orders approved so maintenance could be at certain doors without tenants asking questions. He wanted keys checked out for inspections. He wanted schedules." "And Frank Lofaro," Wolf said. Sloane's eyes squeezed shut for a second. "Lofaro brought lists. He knew the building. He watched who lived alone, who left early, who came home late. He wrote it down. He gave it to Grant." "Why did he die?" Inspector Brenner demanded. Sloane's voice cracked. "Because he got greedy or scared. He came to me and said Grant was holding back money. He said he had other buildings, other names. He said if Grant didn't pay, he would talk. He said he had a notebook that could bury them." Wolf's eyes were steady. The missing notebook. Sloane nodded miserably. "He said he would sell it if he had to." "And the chalk mark," Wolf said. "Explain its purpose in your own words." Sloane's mouth twisted. "It was a signal, a simple update, a way to say whether someone was home or alone or asleep. Grant said it was safer than calls. He said only the right people would understand. He said it wasn't public." Wolf leaned back slightly. "Indeed. The simplest notices are often the least public because the right audience does not need a billboard. It needs only a mark at dawn." Inspector Brenner stepped fully into the room now, satisfied enough to be loud. "Grant, where is he?" Sloane shook her head quickly. "I don't know," he called. "He came sometimes. He never stayed. He said, if I talked, I would regret it." Wolf's gaze did not soften. "You are already regretting it. Now you may become useful. Provide his phone number. Describe him precisely. List every work order you approved at his request. Provide the names of any tenants he asked about. If you omit one, you will be returned to fear without protection." That did it. Sloane began talking in a rush, names and dates spilling out as if she had been holding them under pressure. Brenner interrupted twice, and Wolf cut him off twice without raising his voice. Stebbins wrote furiously, eyes bright. The superintendent tried to bluster, then collapsed under Wolf's stare, and admitted he had taken small payments to confirm, when people were away. He insisted he never hurt anyone. That is what cowards say when they want to keep their self-respect without earning it. Benny, pale and shaking, finally blurted that he had seen the white dust, but thought it was paint, and that he had been left alone at the door while Everett fetched oil. Wolf accepted that with a nod. Ignorance can be true. It can also be convenient. The law would decide. Mrs. Pell, unable to resist, declared, "I told her it was a sign," as if prophecy were a virtue. Wolf looked at her. "Madam, you told her because you enjoy telling. That is not morality. It is appetite." She flushed and fell silent. When Inspector Brenner finally signaled to Stebbins and moved to escort Sloane out, Wolf stopped him with one last sentence. "Inspector," Wolf said, "seek similar marks in other buildings. The method is portable, the code is simple, and the commerce requires repetition. This was not their first notice. It would not have been their last." Brenner grunted, but he listened. He had enough now to feel competent, and that always makes him cooperative. After they left, the office felt larger. The air was cleaner, not because the city had improved, but because the truth had been spoken out loud under good lighting. Fritz appeared in the doorway, as if he had been waiting for the moment the house returned to itself. "Beer, Mr. Wolf, Mr. Goodwin." Wolf accepted his glass with the calm satisfaction of a man reclaiming his schedule. I took mine too, because my nerves had earned it. "So," I said, looking at the little chalk nub on Wolf's desk. We broke the bulletin board. Wolf's eyes rested on the string and chalk. We broke the channel. The ring is broken. The police have the coordinator, the notebook, the work orders, and the access trail. Mrs. Klein will have her locks changed, her door repaired properly, and her routines returned to privacy. Rot, I said. Commerce, Wolf corrected, then took a sip. Rot is a judgment. Commerce is a description. The men who do this imagine themselves practical. That is why they are so dangerous. They believe they are only conducting business. I thought of Mara Klein sitting in her small apartment on Riddle Street, being measured like an object, advertised like an opportunity. The anger in me did not evaporate, but it steadied. Well, I said, the city is loud enough. It shouldn't need quiet signals. Wolf's mouth tightened in something close to disdain. Noise does not prevent whispers. It merely disguises them. He set down his glass and spoke softly, the way he had spoken when the room was full of fear. The simplest notices, Wolf said, are often the least public. The right audience does not need a billboard. It needs only a mark at dawn. Outside, New York roared on, proud and careless. Inside our brownstone, the case ended the way Wolf liked it, with reason, evidence, and a small ugly device reduced to what it truly was. A cheap little notice, meant for the wrong eyes.